For almost 70 years, the Institute for Economic and Social Research, or generally known as LPEM FEB UI, has been at the forefront of Indonesia's advancement in both economy and social development through groundbreaking research, well-rounded publication, and training aimed to improve policies planning and realization.
Jadi LPM ini sendiri sudah merupakan lembaga penelitian dengan sejarah yang sangat panjang. Dia sudah berusia 66 tahun. LPM itu adalah bagian dari Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Indonesia.
First established by Professor Dr. Sumitro Joyo Hadikusumo in 1952, LPEM FEB UI has completed more than 1,200 researches and consultations for both government bodies, state-owned corporation, and the private sectors.
Jadi dari dahulu keterlibatan kita di dalam policy itu hampir tidak pernah putus ya, dari replita ke replita ke replita.
Ada suatu kesadaran di pemerintahan, terutama di Bappenas sebetulnya, itu perlu pelatihan terhadap pegawai Pemda. Karena lambat atau cepat akan ada otonomi daerah.
Pada waktu itu kebetulan Indonesia sedang mengalami suatu proses transisi yang sangat besar, yaitu dari negara yang sangat centralized menjadi negara yang decentralized. Jadi topik desentralisasi dan otonomi daerah menjadi topik yang sangat dicari. Kami bersyukur karena pada waktu itu LPM tampil sebagai salah satu lembaga penelitian terkemuka di bidang tersebut, ya, sehingga selalu menjadi acuan, menjadi bahan perbandingan apabila ada pihak luar negeri misalkan, pihak universitas lain di luar negeri ingin melakukan penelitian atau pendalaman mengenai desentralisasi fiskal dan pembangunan daerah di Indonesia.
Through publishing journals, LPEM FEB UI has been providing various insights in navigating governmental bodies and businesses through the ups and downs of global and national economy situation.
Maklum sekarang bisnis juga tidak bisa tanpa data, informasi, tanpa penggunaan model-model ekonomi terakhir ya. Apalagi kalau Anda sekarang maju ke arah big data, ke arah artificial intelligence ya. Mau tidak mau data analis akan sangat diperlukan.
LPEM FEB UI also provides a range of products and services, which include but not limited to surveys, data analytics, impact analysis, reviews of central and regional government policies or regulations, and training courses.
Untuk pelatihan di LPM ada sifatnya yang pelatihan reguler yang misalnya ditawarkan setiap tahun. Topiknya juga sudah cukup umum. Salah satunya adalah tentang regulatory impact assessment, penganggaran dan perencanaan, keuangan daerah, pengelolaan aset, dan juga sifat tematik lainnya yang sifatnya tailor-made, tergantung juga dari pola dan perkembangan kebutuhan dari klien maupun perkembangan keilmuannya itu sendiri.
Jadi harapan saya bagi LPM adalah untuk memperluas kerjasama penelitian yang selama ini sudah ada, baik dengan industri, dengan pihak di luar negeri, dan juga dengan pemerintah. Karena model pendidikan sekarang adalah model triple helix, yaitu pemerintah, akademisi, dan dunia usaha.
Jangan lupa teknologi berubah sangat pesat sekarang. Dan juga bahwa the way the government doing itu sekarang berubah banyak. LPM itu adalah sebagai sumbernya begawan ekonomi, dia harusnya bisa menjadi sumber yang tidak berhenti dari sisi ilmu pengetahuan, pemahaman, bahkan termasuk wisdom public policy making process, dan stay relevan dengan tantangan hari ini dan ke depan tanpa kehilangan historinya yang legacy masa lalu.
Through our core values, truth, uprightness, and justice, LPM FEB UI will continue to be at the forefront in providing economy and social development insights for Indonesia.
Bridgestone is on a journey toward a more sustainable society. Together with our suppliers and partners, we are determined to pioneer new innovations that deliver value to our customers and the world, improving the way people move, live, work, and play. The global demand for rubber is rising, and we must rise to meet that challenge responsibly. As a global leader providing sustainable mobility and advanced solutions, Bridgestone is working toward 100% sustainable materials at every point of our supply chain by 2050 and beyond. This journey will not be easy, but it will be acted on with the utmost consideration for how we procure our materials, the natural resources we use, and the impact our productivity has on the communities of the people we buy and source from. Our founder, Shojiro Ishibashi, believed in serving society with superior quality. This belief is not only about the products we make, but the legacy we leave behind. It is our way to serve, shaping our continued global compliance, instilling in us a commitment to environmental stewardship, motivating our respect for human rights and fair labor, and emboldening our commitment to increase transparency and engagement with partners. Inspired by our founder's vision, our way to serve will allow us to see long-term environmental, social, and economic value for all our stakeholders at every touch point of our interaction with the world around us. Through our way to serve and its layers of impact, enhancing mobility, supporting people and communities, and advancing environmental stewardship, we will set an example for our industry, lead in sustainable mobility, and provide lasting value to how we conduct our lives today, tomorrow, and into the future. Bridgestone and its partners are on a journey.
PT Vale adalah perusahaan tambang nikel kelas dunia. Di Indonesia, penambangan dan pengolahan PT Vale mencakup 3 provinsi di Pulau Sulawesi. Dengan sistem penambangan berupa open cast mining dan sejak awal telah memiliki smelter dengan teknologi rotary kiln electric furnace, PT Vale menaikkan nilai tambah, menghasilkan nikel dalam meter baik dengan kandungan nikel tinggi dan rendah besi. Kegiatan produksi ini sekaligus berintegrasi dengan komitmen untuk menjaga kelestarian lingkungan. PT Vale mereklamasi dan merehabilitasi lahan pasca tambang, mengembalikan ekosistem seperti semula, menjaga kualitas air, udara, dan mengolah limbah-limbah B3. PT Vale menggunakan energi terbarukan sebagai sumber energi utama, serta senantiasa berkontribusi kepada masyarakat, negara, dan peradaban dunia. Semua ini adalah komitmen untuk berkarya dengan nilai-nilai baru.
Do you have any desire in language learning while constrained by a tight daily schedule? Do you want to enroll in an online language course that is personalized to your needs, quick and easy to set up, offering the best price possible, and focus on real-life conversational skills? With access to 10 different languages, you can learn any desired target language the way it's actually spoken. Speak another language, explore more options, connect to new possibilities. Welcome to the new era of language learning, lingotalk.co.
Setiap saat, berita bertabur di ruang publik. Namun hanya media Indonesia memberikan yang terbaik, mendalam, terpercaya, dan mudah diakses di mana saja dan kapan saja. Media Indonesia Cetak, mediaindonesia.com, dan e-paper Media Indonesia layak menjadi referensi Anda. Media Indonesia, referensi bangsa.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Mitcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Mitcom.id, digitally inspire people.
In 2008, an international research organization was founded that would seek to have a positive influence on relationships and policymaking within and between the countries of ASEAN and East Asia. This is ERIA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia.
When ERIA was first mooted, the thinking was we need a very substantial economic research body.
It's very important for an organization like ASEAN to have the backing academically for what it wants to do. And that's why ERIA fills in the gap and helps provide the research.
It's more about providing the information that's needed for the negotiators or for the political decision makers.
We are not a pure academic institution. We must do the more practical policy recommendation.
And ERIA's role, of course, is also to promote the talking through of sensible policy developments, and it plays a fundamentally important role in that respect.
And ERIA is now accepted as one of the major research institutes in East Asia as a whole.
After its first decade of input into the development of ASEAN, ERIA must now be ready to meet the challenges of the future.
We believe that issues like sustainable development, like environment, issues like education, humanitarian aspect of it, which we think area has the capacity to develop expertise and provide policy recommendation to ASEAN.
Area, hopefully in the not too distant future, will become like the OECD of our region.
Area will continue to contribute to the community building of ASEAN and East Asia.
Halo? Apa? Kamu di depan? Yaudah, aku keluar sekarang ya. Ayo jalan.
Tumben kamu siap-siapnya cepet.
Aku udah siap dari tadi malam. Tetap terlihat modis dimanapun dan kapanpun dengan tema Wiji.
Siapa yang makan nasi ayam gue?
Segi satu.
Udah belum?
Lah beda-beda, antum pesennya.
Ayam!
Kenapa nggak pesen di Hangry Up aja sih?
Di Hangry Up itu ada macam-macam, semua bisa dipesan sekaligus. Lewat Hangry Up, beda seleranya, bisa sama nikmatinnya.
Sekarang lu pakai gituan, Ci?
Oh, ini? Ini sih Kris. Biar kalau mau bayar tinggal scan aja. Gampang kan?
Praktis amat. Gue juga mau dong pakai Kris. Gimana caranya?
Boleh. Nih, tanya Lisa. Gue kirim ya kontaknya.
Lisa Dudu.
Itu udah gue kirim.
Jangan ragu untuk menghubungi saya ya. Lisa akan selalu senang membantu Anda.
Today's seminar, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Muhammad Irza Shahyandrah, Management Student Batch 2020.
And my name is Kianka Azura, Management Student Batch 2020. And we will guide you through today's seminar as your Master of Ceremony.
Before we start, we would like to welcome Dr. Honoris Causa Dr. Randus Muhammad Yusuf Kalla, former Vice President of Indonesia, the current Chairman of the Indonesian Red Cross Society, businessman, and previously the Coordinating Minister for People's Welfare and Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Republic of Indonesia.
Fid Aderson, PhD, Head of Economics Department in the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia.
Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, SAMIDC, PhD, Head of the Fiscal Policy Agency. Economix is one of the biggest international events in the Faculty of Business and Economics, Universitas Indonesia, that is annually held by Kanopi, the student body of Universitas Indonesia undergraduate economics students.
Economix regularly serves as the platform for discussion of crucial global economic issues. The three main events of Economix are seminar, MUN conference, and competition with participants from different countries all around the globe.
In its 18th year, Economix returns with the grand theme of
The Planet in Climate Crisis, a Repercussion of Ignorance. Before we begin today's event, please abide by the following rules.
First, all participants are expected to attend the entire 18th Economics International Seminar until the seminar ended.
All participants are strictly forbidden to make a hassle or make a potential problematic situation once joining the platform.
All participants cannot spam the chat column and activate the camera or mic during the seminar.
All questions must be relevant to the seminar topic and submitted through the Q&A column according to the format, name_institution_question.
Participants can only obtain certificate and vouchers if participants have registered, fill out the attendance forms, and follow all of the seminar sessions until the end.
The link to the attendance form will be posted at the end of the seminar in the Zoom chat and YouTube live chat. Before we move on to the next agenda, we would like to thank our sponsors and media partners. Without their contribution, our event would not be as successful. In particular, we would like to thank our sponsors,
Bridgestone Tire Indonesia,
Fiesta Nugget, rasakan enaknya setiap hari,
Vale Indonesia,
Lingo Talk,
Bank Syariah Indonesia,
Fitbar,
Ajaib,
Ilunia FBUI,
Widji,
Studio Rahel,
Databox,
Treats by Walking Drums,
Hangry,
King Snack Pack,
BNI Sekuritas,
Epson,
Bank Indonesia, our official research partner, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia,
Lembaga Penyelidikan Ekonomi dan Masyarakat FBUI.
Last but not least, we'd also like to thank our official media partner, Trans7 and other media partners,
Trans TV,
CNN,
Net TV,
Metro TV,
Medcom.id,
Detik.com,
Tempo,
Kumparan,
O Channel,
Kontan,
Merdeka.com,
Liputan 6,
Stabilitas,
Kata Data,
Good News from Indonesia,
Media Indonesia,
Infobank,
Greeners,
Info Seminar,
Bumi Buddies,
Greeneration Foundation,
Teens Go Green,
Forest is Our Friend,
Netral News,
Saya Pilih Bumi,
Cerita Iklim,
Sustainable Indonesia,
Event Banget,
BO Economica,
and last but not least, Earth Hero ID. We will open this event by singing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya.
Walkeness, do you know that we have a tagline?
Really? What is it?
So everyone, when I say the 18th Economics, then you have to say S period. Let's try this. 18th Economics, S period.
Let's do it one more time, shall we? 18th Economics,
S period. That's the spirit.
Ladies and gentlemen, now let's move on to the next agenda. We will hear opening remarks from important stakeholders of the 18th Economics.
Now, we are going to hear a welcoming speech from Vit Adresen, PhD, as head of Economics Department in Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Indonesia. Please welcome Mr. Vit Adresen.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greeting to all of you wherever you see this seminar. Honorable speakers, moderators, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to welcome you all to the 18th Economics International Seminar held by Canopy. It is an annual event held by Canopy, a student body, and the Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. I had never imagined that around 26 years ago, Canopy could hold an international seminar on annual basis. Back then, Canopy was only a small discussion group on the Indonesian political economy among second and the third year economic students. So congratulations to Canopy teams, the current and the past. You all did a great job and makes us in the FABUE proud. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the second day of the seminar. Yesterday, notable speakers talked about the emergence of the climate crisis. Today, we will be discussing on how climate crisis affect many sectors of our lives. We will hear it from various perspectives, from the former Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Yusuf Kala, high level of government officials, such as the head of Fiscal Policy Office, Mr. Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, which happens to be my colleague in FABUE, and the Director General of Climate Change Control of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Mr. Ruanda Agung Sugardiman, academics from area, Mr. Venkatachalam and Bumozi, International Agency, Mr. Sudhir Sarma from UNEP, the former Minister of Mining and Mineral Resources, Mr. Archandra Tahar, and the seminar will be moderated by Ibu Tiza Mafira from the Climate Policy Initiatives. As the head of Economics Department, I highly appreciate that the distinguished speakers make their time available for this seminar and share their view. I also appreciate all the sponsors that enable this seminar to happen. I have a strong belief that not only we will hear valuable lessons from all the distinguished speakers, but also will identify a real solution in which we can pay a positive contribution to solving this issue. With that, I conclude my welcoming remark. Thank you and have a fruitful seminar.
Thank you, Mr. Vit Adresen, for your welcoming speech.
Before we proceed, we will hear a few words from our sponsors and media partners.
Bridgestone is on a journey toward a more sustainable society. Together with our suppliers and partners, we are determined to pioneer new innovations that deliver value to our customers and the world, improving the way people move, live, work, and play. The global demand for rubber is rising, and we must rise to meet that challenge responsibly. As a global leader providing sustainable mobility and advanced solutions, Bridgestone is working toward 100% sustainable materials at every point of our supply chain by 2050 and beyond. This journey will not be easy, but it will be acted on with the utmost consideration for how we procure our materials, the natural resources we use, and the impact our productivity has on the communities of the people we buy and source from. Our founder, Shojiro Ishibashi, believed in serving society with superior quality. This belief is not only about the products we make, but the legacy we leave behind. It is our way to serve, shaping our continued global compliance, instilling in us a commitment to environmental stewardship, motivating our respect for human rights and fair labor, and emboldening our commitment to increased transparency and engagement with partners. Inspired by our founder's vision, our way to serve will allow us to see long-term environmental, social, and economic value for all our stakeholders at every touch point of our interaction with the world around us. Through our way to serve and its layers of impact, enhancing mobility, supporting people and communities, and advancing environmental stewardship, we will set an example for our industry, lead in sustainable mobility, and provide lasting value to how we conduct our lives today, tomorrow, and into the future. Bridgestone and its partners are on a journey.
Ok, bon, on va jouer un petit peu. Kita akan bermain dulu. Ini yang Kak Bertrand, tu as déjà appris. Kamu sudah pernah belajar nih.
Oke, nomor 8.
Hai, watashi wa igirisu desu.
Igirisu? Jin.
Iya, jin desu.
Diulang dulu.
Akhirannya kan diganti jadi apa, Mas? Akhirannya R jadi Oke, bagus. Biang.
Terus Vorstellungnya dia cara memperkenalkannya tuh pakai ich bin, mein Name, atau pakai apa nih di sini?
Ich heiße.
Ya, oke, good.
Indonesia, negeri yang menyimpan segala keindahan. My Trip, My Adventure kini hadir setiap minggu jam 8 pagi di Trans TV. Sambut kehadiran Deddy Corbuzier.
Enggak.
Iya, mau.
Suka.
Saya Deddy Corbuzier, yoga.
Deddy's Corner kini hadir setiap Sabtu jam 7 malam di Trans TV.
Drama komedi Korea hadir sepenuh hati. Apa jadinya jika dihidupkan kembali tapi dalam tubuh yang berbeda? Kesempatan kedua yang lucu dan heboh. Dibintangi artis Korea terpopuler, Rain, Woo Yeon Soo. Come Back Mister, Senin sampai Jumat jam 16.45. Hanya di NET.
Usaha tuh kalau menurut gue tips yang paling simpel tuh pertama jalanin aja yang menurut lo emang lo paham dan suka gitu.
Kalau quality lo oke, cuan balik lagi ke lo. Iya.
Jangan lupa saksikan terus Cari Cuan hanya di O Channel.
Moving on, we will now have an opening remark from a former Vice President of Indonesia, the current chairman of the Indonesian Red Cross Society, businessman, and had previously served as the coordinating minister for People's Welfare and Minister of Industry and Trade of the Republic of Indonesia.
Please welcome Dr. Honoris Causa Dr. Andus Muhammad Yusuf Kala.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody. dean of faculties, chairmen, and participants of all this conference webinar, 18th Economics meeting, global economic challenges. Thank you for your invitation, and thank you to a friend that our students in Universitas Indonesia Faculty of Economics and Business arrange these programs. Now there are around 4 problems or issues, big issues in the world. First is pandemics now happen. Democracy, very important because this is system, the world, the best system in the world compared with authoritarian. The third is human right. All people in the world or around the world are using human rights as one basis of how we live in this planet. And the fourth is climate change. If we're talking about pandemic, maybe we can solve, world can solve 2 or 3 years from now on, after all countries in the world have vaccinated. Democracy, yes, there are problems in like in Myanmar or many countries, some countries, but later, I think fast or later, there will be more democratic countries in the world compared to non-democratic. The whole human right is very important because it is affected for all, if not practiced. The fourth is climate change. According to the World Economic Forum 2020, climate change is the biggest risk of economy, world economy. The biggest risk of the world economy. Pandemics too have risks, but maybe we can 2 or 3 years we can solve the problems of those. But climate change takes time. World has changes because carbon emissions from factory, transports, power generations from fossil, they'll be making more warm and affected. Look what happened in Indonesia. There are flood there. Every city, many part of the country is flood. Same as what happened in many parts of the world. Texas going more colder, snow, not happen every year, but happen now on in Texas. Many even in Saudi there are snow. There are wildfire. Many parts of the world, in Indonesia too, in California, in Spain, in Australia. So many wildfire because changes happen. This is making economy in the world. That's why we understand that Paris Climate Conference in 2015 have adopted and agreed 196 countries agreed with Paris Climate Change agreements to making the solve problems, and we hope that 2030 they are reducing 1.5% Celsius of carbon emissions of the world, carbon reduction target. This is very important what we do. What we should do, first thing is habit. Environment. Look like in Indonesia experiences. Look in Kalimantan. In 15th, the forest is still, let's say, 90% of the Kalimantan is forest nation. But now on, many areas is, environment is making a flood and more issue about wildfire in Kalimantan or in Sumatra, because we don't care environments better than what we should do together. Even Amazon in Brazil. That's why this is this is duty of government and all the people we have, and you as students, we should very important thing to do what environment, very town of environments, and to reduce climate change. Using electric car now on is trending. It's good for reducing carbon targets. We hope that this conference will be evaluated, will be fruitful for all, and that's why in this session I am opening the conference for you, and thank you very much for all.
Thank you, Dr. Honoris Causa, Dr. Andus Muhammad Yusuf Kala.
Before we move on, we would like to thank our official research partner, Lembaga Pendidikan Ekonomi dan Masyarakat FEB UI. As we are going to open the keynote session, we would like to wish Mr. Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, SA, MIDEC, PhD, a happy birthday. May your health be preserved and happiness remains within you.
Now, we will proceed to the keynote session of the 18th Economix Seminar.
We will now hear a keynote speech on the topic of Multidimensional Perspectives on Climate Breakdown, Exploring the Aftermath, that will be delivered by Febrio Nathan Kacaribu.
Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, SA, MIDEC, PhD, has been the head of LPM, Macroeconomic and Financial Research since 2015, and was appointed as the head of the Fiscal Policy Agency on April 3, 2020.
He obtained a Bachelor of Economics degree in 2002 from the University of Indonesia and continued his study with a Master degree of International and Development Economics from the Australian National University in 2005. In 2014, he obtained a PhD from the University of Kansas. To Mr. Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, this stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Thank you, Kanopi, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, for arranging such an important event. Highest appreciation to the distinguished speakers, His Excellency Bapak Yusuf Kala, former Vice President of Indonesia, the Honorables Mr. Archandra Tahar, former Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Bapak Fit Adrison, Head of Economics Department of Universitas Indonesia, Bapak Ruanda Agung Sugardiman, Director General of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Mr. Venkatachalam Ambu Mozi, Senior Energy Economist at ERIA, Mr. Sudhir Sharma, Task Manager, GEF Climate Mitigation Asia and the Pacific, Energy and Climate Branch of UNEP, as well as all participants who attend this event. It is an honor to speak in front of you today in the event of the 18th Economix International Seminar. I see great enthusiasm at this event, even though we are still in a pandemic atmosphere. So happy to see young generations has great enthusiasm and critical participation in the efforts to maintain the sustainability of this planet and society. The pandemic has created major multidimensional challenge. We should remain vigilant on the threats from the climate change risk. Before speaking about Indonesia's policies on the climate change, let me share first with you some recent macroeconomic and fiscal development update on Indonesian economy. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been almost a year since WHO announcing COVID-19 as a global pandemic. The health crisis has turned into social and economic crisis that we are facing until today. The impact is severe. It creates a deeper global economic recession than global financial crisis back in 2009. Pandemic has showed the world that the source of economic downturn is not something as we envisage, such as trade wars or geopolitical tension. It of course provides us with great lessons learned, not to be complacent with aspects outside the economy, such as health and nature. Recently, we have seen daily cases of COVID-19 trending down in the world, including Indonesia. Hopefully the trend will be sustainable. But of course, to achieve that, we should continue complying with the health protocols and support vaccination program. Our optimism is also boosted by the positive development of the vaccination as the game changer to change the pandemic and strengthen the economic recovery. The vaccination has been administered in around 103 countries. Indonesia has rolled out more than 2.6 million doses of vaccines, which is currently targeting essential workers, elderly group, and then after the health worker as the first batch. The government is optimistic that vaccination for 181.5 million of our citizens will be finished by March 2022. The Ministry of Health keeps on progressing and making sure that the preparedness from both supply and demand side are really in place. The Ministry of Finance will support through the budget allocation. Together, we still need to strengthen our 3M and 3T. Vaccination becomes a priority policy for Indonesia until the pandemic is finished. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact of pandemic to countries can be seen from contraction recorded in almost all G20 countries and also ASEAN 6 countries. Only Vietnam and China could maintain positive growth in 2020, though it is far below their normal level. Compared to many countries, Indonesia's economic contraction at -2.1% was relatively modest. Indonesia is still one of the most resilient economies. We also could still maintain prudent fiscal management. In 2021, in 2020, fiscal deficit of 6.1%. This is relatively small compared to average deficit of G20 and ASEAN 6 countries. Our low deficit was quite successful in preventing economic growth from falling deeper than most of our peers. Moreover, our public debt level and debt increase in 2020 remain one of the lowest among these countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2020, Indonesia's economy was indeed impacted by the pandemic. However, it is expected to recover in 2021, this year, swiftly. In second quarter, back in 2020, GDP growth rate experienced the deepest contraction at 5.3% year-on-year basis. The economic recovery turning point is ahead, with economic activities indicating an improvement starting in Q3. In particular, household consumption and government expenditure are off the trough. The government plays a key role as the center of the recovery, being the only component that grows positively back in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, we have also seen the promising improvement trend of consumption. We see here there is still opportunity for acceleration. On the lower income side, we can see that the social protection program was expanded during the pandemic and was really effective in providing cushion for this household group. In 2020, this program carried over to 2021 alongside with further improvement of the data. For the middle income group, we also believe that this group has the ability to consume, but its consumption has been restrained due to lingering pandemic risks. The balance of this group's saving account has been consistently stable or even slightly higher, in contrast with lower income saving balance that has been fluctuating. We believe that pandemic handling, including vaccine, will be key to fully restore the household consumption. The recovery trend is also shown from the production side, with information and communication and health sectors having the highest growth in 2020. As one of the key sectors, agriculture also indicated a sign of recovery, albeit with a still low positive growth. Meanwhile, manufacturing, trade, and mining sectors also showed a recovery trajectory. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic recovery trajectory since third quarter of 2020 has resulted in from critical role of the state budget and the so-called PEN program, National Economic Recovery Program. The state budget successfully took the role of the counter-cyclical instrument in avoiding deeper economic contraction. In 2020, budget deficit was expanded at 6.1% of GDP to finance health situation, increasing social protection program to maintain purchasing power of the poor and the vulnerable households, as well as support for the businesses, especially the micro and small medium enterprises and corporation, to ease their burden during the pandemic. The government will continue to ensure the state budget working hard this year to further handling the COVID-19 situation and further mitigate the economic impact. 2021 fiscal policy direction is to be expansive, but yet consolidative, with the deficit level of 5.7% and expected to gradually return to its ceiling of 3% of GDP in 2023. The 2021 state budget was designed to support Indonesia's economy to return to its medium-term growth trajectory. Understanding the vital role of PEN program in preserving economy and also combating the pandemic, the government committed to continue to strengthen this program. This year, the allocation of the PEN program is around 699.43 trillion rupiah to finance health measures, support the economy from both supply and demand side. This amount is higher, 21% compared to the realization of 2022 PEN program. The additional budget is mainly used to finance vaccination program and also for job creation programs. This PEN program is also directed to support purchasing power through social protection and several other programs, such as recently launched incentives for vehicles and house purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, we are optimistic that Indonesian economy will recover faster this year with a growth of 5%. This figure is above, but not too far from the international institutions' estimation, predicting in the range of 4.4 up to 4.8%. There are several factors expected to boost our economic growth. First, our firm commitment to support the vaccination and the continuation of the PEN program in 2021. We estimate the vaccination will shortly boost people's confidence in doing activities, of course, without loosening the discipline of the health protocols. Another crucial factor is the accommodative and synergy policy mix, which include fiscal, monetary, and financial sector policies, aiming to leverage growth and create a sustainable path for the recovery. Last but not least, we have also not forgotten the structural reform agendas for fundamental improvement, and this has started with the implementation of the Omnibus Law on job creation. Speaking about the reform, the current crisis provides momentum to implement stronger reforms that will become a foundation for achieving our ultimate goal of making Indonesia a developed economy as the vision of Indonesia Maju 2045. Historically, Indonesia was always able to implement reforms after going through a period of crisis. After the COVID-19 crisis, structural reform efforts really crucial to restore and even raise productivity levels. The effort to reform has started but needs to be strengthened to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth. In the course, Indonesia is also committed to becoming part of global community to provide solutions for the global challenges in achieving sustainable development, including climate change issues. Ladies and gentlemen, all countries are currently doing their best to overcome the socio-economic impact left by the COVID. Other than that, the governments expect they can build back better by considering sustainability in the development. Greenhouse emissions have risen at the rate of 1.5% per year in the last decade, stabilizing only briefly between 2014 and 2016, before again reach a record high of 55.3 gigaton of CO2 equivalent in 2018. By looking at the data on CO2 content in the atmosphere over the last few decades, we can conclude that CO2 emissions have increased very drastically in the last decade. According to UNEP's emissions gap report that compared where greenhouse gas emissions are heading against where they need to be. This finds that the global temperatures have already increased 1.1 degrees of centigrade because of the emission. It causes various natural phenomena and crucial losses for the state and the society. Scientists have recorded various impacts of climate change. Ice is melting worldwide. It contributes to global sea level rise. Precipitation has increased on average, yet some regions experiencing severe drought. Floods become more common. Hurricanes and storms are likely to become stronger. Many more records show the effects that occur, including to the people, ecosystem, and diseases. They also suggest to cap emission below 2 degrees of Celsius from the pre-industrial level to limit losses caused by global warming and climate change. By maintaining global warming to this limit, we still expect losses in the economy. IPCC predicted that the losses will range from 0.2 up to 2%. Other studies show different figures, but all coincide with that 2 degrees Celsius limit. Will not completely prevent us from losses amid the global warming and climate change. In fact, in a single year, in 2019, an estimated of $232 billion of losses were incurred globally, with 229 billion of that related to weather events. This is higher than GDP of some countries. By 2050, the cumulative damage from climate change is expected to reach $8 trillion, impoverishing the world as a whole by 3% of GDP, and the poorest regions by more. Therefore, leaders agree to discuss and plan movements to address climate change. One of the results of the discussion is the Paris Agreement, which has been adopted by 196 parties at COP21 in Paris. Its goal is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees of Celsius, and preferably to 1.5 degrees of Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels, by ensuring that the emissions output doesn't exceed 25 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030, or 40 gigatons of CO2 equivalent at the maximum. Under the agreements, countries communicate commitments and action plan to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience to adapt to the impacts of climate change in the nationally determined contributions. In Paris Agreement, this is in line with 2030 SDGs agenda. Under SDGs agenda number 13, UN member countries also frame their agendas and political policies to climate actions. If we look into it, there are even links with Sustainable Development Goals number 3, 4, and 5. After the agreement was reached, the leaders mainstreamed the goal in their country's policies and regularly meet to discuss various related topics, including solutions to some of the problems faced in their implementation, both in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and in various other forms. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has taught us a valuable lesson that we should consider sustainability aspect on our development. During the outbreak, while policies to limit face-to-face contacts and activities enforced, the environment is restored quickly and pollution levels hitting multi-year lows. World Meteorological Organization data found that global CO2 emission had decreased by 6% during the pandemic. However, the alleged reduction in emission is only a short-term phenomenon. As our current economy is still closely related to emission-producing activities, it can be predicted that the emission level will rebound as soon as the economic and social activities recover. Ladies and gentlemen, the pattern of the emission rates generally coincide with the rate of post-crisis economic growth. The case in the US shows that after the crisis, the rise of the economy triggers an increase in CO2 emissions back on track. Thus, we need a comprehensive policy package to anticipate the risk of emission increase during the economic recovery and find a green transition. Unexpectedly, the target of maintaining a global temperature to well below 2 degrees of Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels, the global temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees of Celsius. According to UNEP's emission gap report, even if all unconditional NDCs are implemented, we're still on course for a 3.2 degrees of Celsius temperature rise. Go to the next slide. As a vulnerable country, Indonesia has a strong commitment to address climate change. National Mitigation Action Plan was established back in 2011, while Adaptation Plan was in 2014. Indonesia also actively participates in global movements and discussion to control climate change by ratifying Paris Agreement and mainstreaming it into our policies and regulation. Our medium-term development plan for 2020 to 2024 already integrate climate change into the economic growth to ensure sustainability into the development. Our target is reducing the emission by 29% compared to the business as usual scenario, and by 41% subject to international support. This target will be achieved through 5 sectors with different targets. 2 most important sectors are forestry and energy. We also wish to increase our resilience to climate change through 5 aspects: life system resilience, spatial territory resilience, economic resilience, ecosystem resilience, and supporting system resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an ambitious target and requires considerable resources. Based on the second biennial update report, the financing needs for climate mitigation program is at least 3,461 trillion rupiah. The average per year requires around 266 trillion rupiah, among which 221.6 or 81.7% is for energy and transportation sector, while the rest is needed to fund the other sectors. According to our climate budget tagging, the average expenditure for climate change reached 89.6 trillion per year. Approximately 88.1% was spent on green infrastructure, and the rest for policy formulation and regulation related to climate change. MRV, community empowerment and capacity building program for stakeholders. This is equal to 34% of the average climate mitigation financing need in a year. We all realize that government budget is very limited to afford this, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we cannot afford not to do this. As part of the fiscal instrument, the state budget can be used to encourage the transformation process of the green economy with the arm length through state revenue, spending, and financing. It is expected to encourage a community and stakeholders to contribute to the green economy. The state revenue policy is directed to stimulate private investment. Ministry of Finance provides tax facilities in the form of tax holiday, tax allowance, exemption of import duties, reduction of VAT, government bond tax, and reduction of property tax. State spending policies are directed to encourage low carbon and climate resilient government spending. The Ministry of Finance implements climate budget tagging to determine the contribution of the state budget in tackling the climate change. While budget financing policy is directed to support expansive fiscal policy by developing innovative financing instruments that are managed prudently in order to maintain fiscal sustainability, sovereign green sukuk is one of the examples. To promote and encourage innovative financing in Indonesia, government has made a breakthrough with issuance of the green sukuk. Back in 2018, government of Indonesia launched the first sovereign green sukuk and obtained $1.25 billion in funding and received 8 international awards after the first issuance of the green sukuk. The issuance of green sukuk continued in 2019 and 2020 through the issuance of green sukuk retail in November 2019 and 2020. Specifically, for the third issuance of green sukuk in June 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an increase in green investors up to 33.7% and the lowest coupon value for a 5-year tenor at 2.3%, and also experienced a 7.37 oversubscribed. There are 5 areas of funding that have been financed by green sukuk, including sustainable transportation, energy efficiency, renewable energy, resilience to climate change for disaster risk areas, and waste to energy and waste management. Ladies and gentlemen, Government of Indonesia provides various fiscal stimulus to encourage green investment in Indonesia. 2 of the facilities revising the tax policy and PPP scheme. In some recent years, 2 tax policies were revised. The tax holiday, which is now giving 100% for new investment up to 20 years, and also VAT facility for luxury good that has been considered as considered vehicles emission potential. Through the PPP mechanism, the government provides 3 types of facility. The first one is called a project development facility, used to finance the implementation of facilities for preparing the final study of the feasibility studies and facilities for transaction assistance. The second is called Viability Gap Fund, where government contributes in some parts of the construction cost to improve the financial feasibility of the project. And third, government guarantee, which is carried out through the Infrastructure Guarantee Business Entity, PT Penjaminan Infrastruktur Indonesia, with a single window policy. In the state spending side, the government also supports subnational government to strengthen their capacity in tackling the climate change through fiscal transfer instruments. There are various fiscal transfer instruments to increase the resiliency. First, we have profit sharing fund on natural resources from forestry and geothermal. Second, to strengthen the infrastructure development facility, we use Spatial Allocation Fund for Physical Development, the FISIC, especially on agriculture, irrigation development, environment, forestry, marine and fisheries development. Third, we also provide non-physical spatial allocation fund to strengthen management and financial capacity of the subnational government, mainly for waste management. Last but not least, we also have incentivized to use incentive fund on waste management for subnational government that performs well in waste management. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to fiscal policy, Ministry of Finance also provides various funding windows to support climate change mitigation and adaptation actions in Indonesia. SDG Indonesia 1, which is a blended finance platform, access to Green Climate Fund, GCF, where Fiscal Policy Agency is appointed as National Design Authority of GCF Indonesia. There's also PISP, which is a drilling financing and guarantee facility for geothermal projects. BPDLH, which is a public service agency that aims to manage funds to improve the quality of the environment and control climate change in Indonesia. These are the catalysts for green investment in Indonesia. To strengthen the economy and a more environmentally friendly business ecosystem, the government synergizes with the central banks Financial Sector Authority, developing a policy mix of fiscal, monetary, and financial sectors concerning with the climate change issues. Finally, I would like to conclude my presentation today. The global economy started growing. This might bring back the level of emission. We know that every economic activity produces negative externalities. One of them is the emissions. Uncontrolled emissions are the forerunner of the climate change, and climate change is threatening, so the leaders agreed to tackle it together. We realize that even in these difficult situations due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our attention to climate change should not fade away. We must prepare ourselves and don't let our guard down for the economic challenges ahead that are fraught with uncertainty. In the midst of this pandemic, green economic recovery is implemented in various countries to ensure sustainability. Participation of various parties is crucial in green economic recovery, and the government has an important role to encourage the participation and collaboration among parties. These are various policies options to consider that I mentioned to play the role and to ensure sustainable development in general. Together, we will survive and continue to provide better policy for sustainable economy and the ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Febrio Nathan Kacaribu, for the insightful speech. We now kindly invite Mr. Febrio Nathan Kacaribu to turn your camera to receive our token of appreciation.
We also kindly invite Kevin Bagasatria as the Chief Executive Officer of the 18th Economix to give the token of appreciation.
Dear Mr. Febrio Kacaribu, before I hand our token of appreciation, I would like to say thank you for your very, very insightful presentation, which has shown the government of Indonesia's and the Ministry of Finance commitment towards mitigating climate change. Therefore, please receive our token of appreciation, Pak Febrio Kacaribu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bridgestone is on a journey toward a more sustainable society. Together with our suppliers and partners, we are determined to pioneer new innovations that deliver value to our customers and the world, improving the way people move, live, work, and play. The global demand for rubber is rising, and we must rise to meet that challenge responsibly. As a global leader providing sustainable mobility and advanced solutions, Bridgestone is working toward 100% sustainable materials at every point of our supply chain by 2050 and beyond. This journey will not be easy, but it will be acted on with the utmost consideration for how we procure our materials, the natural resources we use, and the impact our productivity has on the communities of the people we buy and source from. Our founder, Shojiro Ishibashi, believed in serving society with superior quality. This belief is not only about the products we make, but the legacy we leave behind. It is our way to serve, shaping our continued global compliance, instilling in us a commitment to environmental stewardship, motivating our respect for human rights and fair labor, and emboldening our commitment to increase transparency and engagement with partners. Inspired by our founder's vision, our way to serve will allow us to see long-term environmental, social, and economic value for all our stakeholders at every touch point of our interaction with the world around us. Through our way to serve and its layers of impact, enhancing mobility, supporting people and communities, and advancing environmental stewardship, we will set an example for our industry, lead in sustainable mobility, and provide lasting value to how we conduct our lives today, tomorrow, and into the future. Bridgestone and its partners are on a journey.
Setiap saat, berita bertabur di ruang publik. Namun hanya media Indonesia memberikan yang terbaik. mendalam, terpercaya, dan mudah diakses di mana saja dan kapan saja. Media Indonesia Cetak, mediaindonesia.com, dan e-paper Media Indonesia layak menjadi referensi Anda. Media Indonesia, referensi bangsa.
Speaking of which, Bridgestone Tire Indonesia, as one of the biggest tire manufacturer in Indonesia, has been producing highest quality of tires. And not just that, this company always goes beyond. They don't stop giving impact to the society through their sustainable society journey.
This year, this company is celebrating its 45th birthday in February. We would like to say happy 45th birthday. We wish you success and blessings in your journey. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will enter the moderated session of the seminar titled Multidimensional Perspectives on Climate Breakdown, Exploring the Aftermath. This session will be moderated by Ms. Tiza Mafira.
Tiza Mafira is an Associate Director of Climate Policy Initiative since October 2018. She specializes in law, public policy, and regulations with substantial experience in government, private sector, and non-governmental organizations.
She also has expertise in several issues, including climate financing, climate change, natural resources, land use, renewable energy, and waste management policies in Indonesia.
She received her bachelor's degree in law from Universitas Indonesia and obtained her master's degree from Harvard Law School in 2010.
Please welcome Ms. Tiza Mafira.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, namo buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Om Swastiastu, Om. Good morning and welcome to the 18th Economix International Seminar on our discussion today titled Multidimensional Perspectives on Climate Breakdown, Exploring the Aftermath. This is a very apt title. We're going to be discussing the climate breakdown and the aftermath and how there might still be hope and there should be hope for us to continue our economic growth while addressing the climate crisis. So let me first welcome our speakers today. Pak Ruanda Agung Sugardiman, Director General for Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Pak Ruanda, welcome.
Yeah.
And then our second speaker is Pak Venkatachalam Anbumozi, Senior Energy Economist at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Mr. Anbumozi, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Our next speaker is Mr. Sudhir Sharma, who is Task Manager at the Global Environmental Fund, Climate Mitigation Asia and the Pacific with UNEP. Mr. Sharma, welcome on board. And last but not least is Pak Archandra Tahar, former Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources. Welcome, Pak Archandra. It's a pleasure to have you all with us. So before we begin, I'd just like to lay out a little bit of the context of today's discussion. As we know, the climate crisis is upon us. We have been experiencing firsthand the effects of worsening extreme weather, worsening climate conditions, floods, and extreme drought. The global community, as embodied within the Paris Agreement, has achieved a consensus to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And multiple countries have pledged net zero emissions by 2050. Indonesia has also made several targets. Indonesia has targets within the nationally determined contributions to reduce emissions. Indonesia has targets to increase the renewable energy portion of its energy output. We also have targets to achieve low carbon development, to safeguard biodiversity, and to recover from the current COVID-19 pandemic with strong economic growth. So this is an uphill task for any country, including Indonesia. But on the current path to warming, the climate crisis could cause global GDP to fall by 30% within the next 50 years, threaten the bottom line of businesses and supply chains, and threaten the very fabric of human life and social stability. So, how do we overcome these challenges? Today we have a distinguished panel to help us to discuss these challenges and the opportunities ahead, to understand the current climate crisis, its impact towards multiple economic sectors, to provide us with insight on policies to prevent the climate crisis from worsening, and pathways to maintain economic stability by addressing the climate crisis. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Pak Rwanda Agung Sugardiman. Pak Rwanda is Director General of Climate Change Control at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Pak Rwanda has a Bachelor of Forestry at Universitas Gadjah Mada and a Doctorate of Environmental Sciences at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Pak Rwanda, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Tisa. Good morning, speakers and audiences. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here at the 18 Global Economic Challenges in the University of Indonesia. This is my good opportunity to share my information, my sharing experience in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So I'm starting talking about this issue that it is said is very abstract, and we can make this easier to understand with this figure. So we are where we are now from the perspective of the temperature of the global international condition. So reaching the 2020 to 2030, we almost 1.5 degrees Celsius, our threshold for the reducing emission from greenhouse gas emission. So this is the condition of the global temperature. So we are now have to be worried about this condition. This is from the report, the IPCC. So how is the condition of Asia, Southeast Asia? So the risks from the climate change and the potential for risk reduction through mitigation adaptation. You can see here, every failure in mitigation will cause difficulties to manage risks even with the high adaptation. So now this condition of the Southeast Asia or regional in Asia, we can see from that condition. The consequences to our country, our beloved country, as you can see the Jakarta condition right now. And from that, we can see the data, the economic losses from flooding in Jakarta, economic activities only, around 1 trillion in 2020. And how about 2021 that just started in 2 months? It's about 100 billion. This is the data from Kadin. So from the BNPB, the National Disaster Agency, we can see that there are many hydrometeorological disaster. So until September 2020, we have about 2,000 disasters that happen in Indonesia. And how about the consequences in 2020, last year? So there are many news in the media, in the internet, how is the disaster has impact to our economic, our agriculture, and we can see from that figure. So this from the Professor Rizaldi, he said in the paper, Rizaldi Burke 2013, look at the climate impact in the near-term view. It may not yet be seen as a very urgent and high priority issue, but this will put us at the risk to getting significant loss later and may lead to adaptation, and threaten food security and sustainable development. So we have to worry about this condition. So how we can see from the agricultural sector, there is a decrease crop production on that issue, especially in the South Sumatra and the Central and East Indonesia. It's around 1.1 to 0.25 ton per hectare. This is also we have to worry that condition. Yeah, from that issue, Indonesia as a international or global community has a commitment to increase our greenhouse gas emission by 29% on 2030 from the AU. And we can see the key figure. We have to low carbon and climate resilient development, Indonesia for the ability to climate change, land-based and ocean adaptation and mitigation, transparency framework, mean of implementation, and also the international cooperation. From the adaptation point of view, we have to have a social and livelihood resilience, economic resilience, and also ecosystem and landscape resilience. So from that, we put our commitment in the national determined contribution that this already explained in the opening. So what is the action in mitigation to achieve our NDC target? There are 5 sectors: energy, forestry, agriculture, waste, and industrial process and product use. So from that 5 sectors, we have already the list of activity that through this activity, we have to achieve our NDC target. There are many activities that stated there, so you can see from this slide. And this is the energy sector. You can see from this table, so from this figure, so the forestry sector, to achieve the target, we have already 70% from BAU of the forestry. But you can see this energy is about 19% from the BAU of energy. So from this figure, we can still have a window to make a more achievement to reduce the energy, the BAU energy on that. We can discuss later how we can achieve more ambitious to energy sector. Yes, what we have a challenge to do, that's all of these things. So from this kind of activity, we have a challenge on the regulation policy, aggregation of baseline, achievement of the party stakeholder and non-party stakeholder, technical capacity, financial gap, potential of double counting, transparency framework. And that challenge is to stay at the national level, also in the provincial and city and community, and also in private sector. How we can do with this challenge? We have already some of activity to deal with this challenge. For example, in the provincial, we have to have the data availability and validity at hub institution, mean of implementation. So there are many activities that we can face the challenge to be done. And the financial gap. So from this report to UNFCCC, we can say the financial need 2030 to achieve our NDC. In the mitigation action, we need about 4,500 trillion rupiahs, and adaptation is about 1,500 trillion rupiah. And we do also the climate budget taking mitigation from the national budget. In 2018, it's about 72,000 trillion. We have already make a budget taking on our national budget. So what we need is to innovate financial instrument development and involvement of private investment. This is we can discuss on this workshop today. Ladies and gentlemen, and also the audiences, And beyond the first NDC, there are many steps that we have to be done. The first NDC, second NDC, then achievement of NDC 2030. And until we have 2050, we have to achieve toward net zero emission. Now we are preparing the long-term strategy, low carbon initiative that we have already discussing and make some discussion with the expert. Now, hopefully this here we can submit also the long-term strategy 2050 to achieve net zero emission in Indonesia. So what is the role and activity that university and researchers can contribute on that side? In the local, so research on the local emission factor, strengthen the local government and private sector and community. In the national level, we have to strengthen the policy, strengthen the implementation, and the international side, we have to involve our scientists in the scientific publication and international journal, and also involve more in the IPCC meeting. So our researcher, our publication can access by the international. So there are many researchers in Indonesia that already involved in the IPCC. You can see from that one. There are many working groups that already role of our scientists in the IPCC meeting. That's what I share to you, and return back to Tisa. Thank you, Tisa.
Very much, Pak Ruanda. Thank you so much for your insight and really highlighting how the climate crisis impacts multiple dimensions in accordance with our title today, and also for providing insight on how Indonesia is also trying to tackle this problem from multiple dimensions, from the land use side and energy and waste, and from the industrial side. And finally, picking up from your last statement on the importance of universities and research institutions, this provides a great segue into our next speaker, who works in energy research. So please welcome Mr. Venkatachalam Anbumozi. Mr. Anbumozi is a senior energy economist at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Previously, he worked in multiple institutions, including the Asian Development Bank, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and the University of Tokyo. Mr. Anbu has a PhD in regional economics and planning from the University of Tokyo. Mr. Anbu, the floor is yours. Welcome. Mr. Anbu, are you able to hear me? I think you're still on mute. We cannot hear you yet.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, very good.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, thank you very much. And it is my great pleasure to join this meeting and 18th Economics organized by University of Indonesia. And it is first congratulations for the student body for making this event and also bringing that issue very lively and today. Let me actually think about this climate, and could you please show my slides, or can I show it from here? Yeah, my point I'm here would like to make is These climate actions cannot be forget in the amidst of pandemic 19, and we know that is the pandemic is a health crisis, but it also provides an opportunity to basically to ingrain these long-term plans, long-term risk planning, particularly climate actions, into this short-term recovery action. That is the point that is I would like to make in the next 15 minutes. Next one, please. So this problems, I think the climate problem has been recognized in the first week of January when this World Economic Forum, and where this summit leaders, the head of the governments as well as the business leaders, when they assembled, and then they conducted a survey that shows that is what are the next top 10 problems over the next 10 years. And you can find that is apart from the pandemic and the livelihood changes caused by the pandemic, still we remind this climate actions is remaining as a kind of a challenge that is recognized by the world leaders. Nearly 69% of these people has been expressed concern and about this problem. This will be a kind of a defining moment for the development in the following years. Next one, please. So when we see that the science of the climate change, and here it is this kind of hard reality that is we have, and about by the year last year, 2019, and we have emitted almost 79 gigatons of the carbon emissions. And basically, to be frank, and it is accepted the fact that is we have only about 28 years to go if our business as usual continues. So the science is very clear, that is we cannot afford to further global warming. Next one, please. So then what will happen? I think there are the different scenarios, and starting with this IPCC and the Strength report says that is if it is beyond the 1 degree centigrade, and if you are moving to 2 degrees centigrade, that comes from the accumulation of the carbon dioxide, we have the severe impact. One is these impacts are seen in the food sector. The second is more the impact on the water sector, and third one is these extreme weather events. So this relationship is very complicated, and this temporary phenomena like global climate change and this pandemic, and as well as these financial things, he doesn't have a recognize this kind of a long-term impact. So we need to clear understanding that we do face this inconvenient truth, or this risks are very higher. Next one, please. Then there are where this most of the impacts. It is clearly shows that it is one of the projections coming from our own works. It is superimposed by the global outlook, and we find that is the Southeast Asia region, and as well as Southeast Asia is going to impact more by this climate change. So in the future, within the 20-25 years, we could be able to lose about 6 to 8% of the GDP, mainly because of the climate change. Next one, please. Then this comes this Paris Agreement, and this is a kind of a watershed event, and happened in 2016. And here it is the first time when all the countries has committed. And here I think we need to appreciate this leadership taken by Indonesia at the time, the president, and where we committed. It is a kind of a first time all the countries in the global come together to come for an agreement. It is mostly involuntary to meet these global climate goals. Previously, before this Paris Agreement, there is a differentiation between the developed countries and these developing and the small and medium-sized economies. But this is a kind of watershed event, and where all the countries has committed to reduce the emissions, and they have submitted the nationally determined contributions. So that has been translated into targets. That is a nationally binding target. Next slide, please. This was, that is the how this is the countries has been implementing their NDC's commitments. And here we find a kind of three groupings. One is the high income countries like Korea, Japan, and then there is the upper middle income countries like Thailand, and here we find that is the lower middle income countries. Here each one has their own conditions and own targets set for the years to come. And here basically they target for 2030, and here for example in Indonesia's case about 47% of this commitment that comes under the two windows. One is what the countries can do, and second thing is what they can do more with this international support. Next one please. Then in practically, if you come down or if you scale down these NDC's commitments, basically you have three areas to work on. One is improving the energy efficiency. That is now it has been count down to basically we need to energy industry to be reduced to by 26 by the year 2030. On the other hand, this electricity supply has to be decarbonized to the level of 260 kilowatt hour per. Then finally, that is the end-use fuel situation. That means that is we need to change the transport sector. That is how we are using the fuel use. These are the three pillars of NDC's commitments made by all the developing countries. Next one, please. Next slide, please. But it looks interesting, but at the same time, this is not going to be easy, particularly for the developing and then emerging economies. And this is how that is the energy is related to the Human Development Index. And here you can say by the countries like Australia and USA and Japan, their energy is very high. At the same time, their Human Development Index is nearly 0.9 or 1. Here, what is the dilemma for the policymakers is how we can access to this energy in a clean energy and how we can move forward to the human development. So for that, basically we can have a kind of a different pathway that we don't need to imitate that developed countries like Australia, USA and Japan. That is where there is most of the innovation comes in. Next one, please. So this is what most of the governments are currently doing in the case of climate change mitigation. And most are increasing that energy efficiency. And this is one of the low-hanging fruits. Then second is this decarbonization of the electricity, which has kind of a cost, and somebody has to pay for the cost. Whether it is the public government is paying for it, or it is the private sector is paying for it, or the people who is going to pay for it. This is where that comes in. And third one is also it provides a kind of an opportunity in the long term. That is the end-use fuel switching. This provides a kind of opportunities for the innovation. This is a kind of a roadmap that is we have, and we do have the low-hanging fruits. But sometimes we need to think about is going to pay for this extra cost, additional costs for the climate change mitigations. Next one, please. So another aspect that is we cannot forget is this. One is the climate change mitigation, and another is the climate change adaptation. It is the two sides of the same coin, and here this is where we need to think about this adaptation and the benefits, the co-benefits for the climate actions. That action that can give the resilience to the system, and as well as the mitigating, and that is the greenhouse gas mitigation. Here we can find, if you plan, it is at the macro level, at the measure level, at the local level, we can harness the benefits of these core benefits. And this is both the climate change mitigation, disaster resilience, and then adaptation to this vulnerability of the shocks that is climate risk brings in. Next one, please. Then today morning there was a talk about how these climate actions are interlinked, and we do have this another commitment, the global commitment 2030 agenda. There are 17 goals. Out of 17 goals, there are 8 very much related to the climate sector and the sustainable consumption and production. These are the primary areas that we need to focus on. So here it's also SDGs in 2030 is a kind of a purchase for order for the most of our actions, the climate actions. Next one, please. Then when coming to the climate actions, and here we need to differentiate what are these direct benefits, this vulnerability reduction, and some of this cost. For example, in China, they are providing the farmers the drought-tolerant varieties. Here, basically, the focus is more on the vulnerability reduction. On the other hand, for example, in Bangladesh and Fiji, they are constructing this new infrastructure that is resilient. Here, we find this response to the impacts is 0%, but it brings the co-benefits. So we need to identify what are the structural measures and what are the non-structural measures and how it benefits the communities. That is where our future investments will come into it. And here we need to understand this adaptation, climate change adaptation is a continuation of the activities, and there need to be a kind of macro planning for it. Unfortunately, most of these adaptation actions are coming up from the perspective of bottom-up planning. So it has been not done by the top-down approaches. Next one, please. So here, I think this is an area of work that is, we did it, and we find that is this climate change adaptation, that is building the roadmap. It involves, there are 4 steps. One is building the scientific understanding and capacity. Second thing is targeted information and training for the policymakers. And then third one is the developing the pilot activities involving the governments, private sector, and this community-based organization. Finally, only that is the mainstreaming of this climate adaptation into sectoral planning happens. We found basically this takes about nearly 7 to 8 years, so starting from the building the scientific capacity to the mainstreaming. It is not going to happen overnight. We need to learn from each other and to build that structural changes that is needed at the sector level. And it involves a partnership, and it is not going to be dealt with either by the government or the private sector or by the communities. We need to build a partnership, and partnership starts with the scientific understanding. And for example, at most of the countries, including Indonesia, we don't have the good models to scale down to at the local level, at the district level. And here, where is the lot of bottlenecks exist, and also we don't know that is what is the long-term cost of these climate change adaptations. Next one, please. And here, basically, we identify there are 3 bottlenecks. That is the why we cannot mainstream this climate change adaptation or the climate change actions into the sectoral planning. Here, the knowledge gap, and still that's climate science is agreed, but still we don't know what are the awareness creation at the local level, at the sector level. So we do find a knowledge gap exists, and we don't have the second is the capacity. That is what kind of combination of the structural measures, for example, in building the hard infrastructure and the software infrastructure, like developing an insurance mechanisms. This is lacking at the sector level, at the local level. And finally, I think today morning it has been discussed about the financing. That is, who is going to finance this extra cost? We know that the private sector is not ready for it. At the same time, there is a risk involved in it, where we need a kind of a public and the public financing and the market-based mechanisms can help it. Next one, please. So we estimate the cost of meeting this Paris climate agreement, and here we find there are some low-hanging fruits. For example, Indonesia, if you focus on this forest sector, and here it is a kind of forest sector at the peat soils, and there is a lot of opportunities, low-hanging fruit. And if you concentrate on your actions, particularly the climate actions based on the 3 pillars, one is bringing the effectiveness, increasing these energy pathways. Second is the efficiency and the equity, developing a new carbon trading mechanisms, and finally targeting the co-benefit. And if you apply these 3 principles, effectiveness and then equity and then co-benefit, then we found the cost of implementing this NDCs is very limited. It is about 2 to 3% of the GDP over the 10-year period. This is very much small when compared to this total loss, which is about 6 to 8% in the framework in the years of about 50 years framework. So we need to think about it, and we need to innovate these new approaches in meeting these targets. Next one, please. This is some of our estimations from 2020 to 2050. And for example, ASEAN as a group of 10 countries need about 168 billion, I think. But what is available now, it is only the millions. So it's a huge gap. And how we are going to finance this gap? So that is a very much important. And this, as I told before, it cannot be done by the private sector alone, and it cannot be done by the government alone, and it cannot be done by the community alone. Here we need to think about it, and we need to come together. And there are a lot of opportunities, like now this crowdfunding and digitalization helps us. And we have a study on it, and we found about 20% of the reduction, and in this the funding cost could be done by application of this new digital technologies. Next one, please. And also for this coming, basically, countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, they have the second movers advantage, particularly developing the new technologies like biofuel and the battery technologies. And on the right hand side, you can see that is how countries like Japan and China are moving up in producing this green pattern technologies. So we need to, there is a need for the countries, particularly the young communities, to invest more on the research and the development of the technologies. This is not only the technological innovations, but all the business models, how you can bring that technologies into these business models, and also the sector level actions. That is very much important, and some countries has already harnessing this. For example, Japan and Korea are harnessing it, and because of this long-term investments. Next one, please. So this is the one area that is the next few slides. I would like to talk about how this COVID has changed, and this is the kind of the global level figure. And if you think that is the most of the during the COVID period and the 2020 from January to November 2020, and here we can find that there is a lot of investments are rotating down. This is a kind of challenge. Now this health priority comes, and then economic has to be restarted. In between it comes these climate actions. And here we find that is most of this actions has been downside and downscaled, except all these renewable energy investments. I think most of them are happening in Europe because of this European Green New Deal. And so here I think how we can think about it, bringing this multiple go benefits, how this long-term climate interest can be ingrained into mainstreamed into this recovery packages. So that is the kind of a challenging question. And next one, please. This is how this there are go benefit and of this COVID also. Here it sees how this mega cities like Beijing and New Delhi and also Bangkok. Here, basically, we found during the long term there is a lot of air quality improvement and in the mega cities. If this trend is continued, and we will be living in a very clean air and green environment, but it's not going to happen, and the economy is rebounding, and most of the energy consumption has been increasing in the mega cities. Again, we can find that is the we are coming back to the business as usual. Next one, please. So in this aspect and this cities, mega cities, and these new concepts like smart cities, this is integration of these ICT technologies brings a kind of new opportunities, and because most of the future and lives in both the economic future as well as the environmental future as well as the climate actions lies in the cities. And I again re-emphasize this climate actions as the opportunity to win, or it is a fail, depending upon how the cities are planning their actions. And here we find many opportunities exist in this in the smart city concept, and but it's also changing, challenging this how we are bringing the technologies and how we are bringing the finance to the cities to implement these activities. Next one, please. So this is the plausible scenarios of the carbon emissions in the post-COVID era, and here you can see that is the how this 2020 there is a drop in the global emissions at the global level. Now we have the two options. One is going as usual, that is in the upper dotted lines. Then we will have uncontrolled emissions. And the second thing is this is a green line, the dotted green line. By intervening now, and we can bring back this climate change to the near controllable limit within the 2030 or 2050 years time framework. So this is the opportunities are there. How we can do it? And next one, please. So this is how these stimulus packages are evolving, and most of the countries in the region, and as well as the global level, and the countries are formulating this economic recovery packages. And this the first phase of this economic recovery packages are bringing the business to the normal. And second, the stimulus is to create the new demand. And here we find some countries in the EU and Korea, some countries are having more green components. That is where there is investments in the clean energy, climate change adaptation, the resilience are going on. In some countries, still we could not able to give that much dimension. So we re-emphasize that it is a one-time opportunity to implement, to think about the hard reforms and take that appropriate activities. And so it is a hard thing, but if you make actions now, in the next 5 to 6 months, then we can achieve the co-benefits of equity, co-benefits of bringing the improved air quality, and finally that is reducing the cost of the climate actions. Now it is an opportunity, and we have formulated certain policy proposals. The next one, please. This is my last slide, and sorry, I'm taking up more time. So here, basically, there are 4 take-home messages. That is, if you think about the climate actions in the case of a pandemic era, and there are 4 things we need to think about it. The past climate actions entailed a top-down sectoral initiatives that are relatively fast and facilitated by the easy to implement technologies. It provided the incremental benefits such as the energy security. This is what the climate action which has been done until the pandemic era. So these are most of these actions are taken by the top down, and we have harnessed almost all these low hanging fruits. When coming to the resilience, and these our adaptation measures are mostly by the bottom up approaches by the communities, the farmers, and then sectoral actions. But here we do have the difficulties, and we don't have that kind of a top-down approach as we had seen in the climate change mitigations. And this most is done by the public financing, and here the private financing is very much limited. So as the countries are growing the long-term decarbonization and the resilient growth, the pandemic crisis offers an opportunity. I can say it is a kind of once-in-a-generation opportunity. I think it is an opportunity to think about the hard reforms. So that is, we can protect the future generation. So there is our our recovery will be much more greener, much more sustainable. So it is a once in a generational opportunity where the stimulus packages has to be thought about it and has to be designed for the future. Third one is the national development policies will need to reflect the transformative elements on the ambitious stimulus packages that can reinvigorate the local economy. And this pandemic brings this kind of impact. That is, most of these actions has to be taken, and the priority is to reinvigorate the local economies. And here in some countries like EU, Korea, and Japan has been doing a lot. And here we need to focus on these recovery packages has to be focused more on generating the green employment and building a better climate resilient future. So once again, and thank you very much for giving the opportunities. And these are some of the key messages. Next slide, please. And most of our actions, and here I can say that is a kind of myth and the realities. And here we don't need to think that the climate change is a risk. And it is an opportunity, and the time is to act now. And this pandemic provides an opportunity to act now, and where there is the the cost of reduction will be here. And the emerging economies like Indonesia and the ASEAN and India can set an example by harnessing the co-benefits of the climate actions. And this pandemic recovery and the stimulus packages will be an opportunity for it. And here we need to act on it, and the ones in general, we cannot miss this opportunity that is made by this crisis. Next one, please. And this is what I had deliberated. It's mostly available in our website, and we do have about 20 to 23 projects that is focusing on the climate change adaptation and the mitigation. And if you can visit www.eria.org to see that is our works, and there plenty of works has been done, and now it is more to be done, and in the terms of implementation. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anbu, for the very detailed and comprehensive presentation. I particularly want to seize on a very important statement that you made, that developing countries find it not easy to get into the new growth paradigm and get into the green energy transition. But there's an opportunity for developing countries to kind of jump, I think is what you said, in the sense that there's no need for developing countries to follow the pathway of industrial countries with historical pollution levels, but instead jump into this kind of second mover's advantage and into clean energy. This is very important because it kind of challenges the traditional notion of growth, while presenting the current pandemic crisis as an opportunity for green recovery, as you said. And I think this is particularly intriguing for the young economists in the audience, and is potentially a lifetime pursuit for the young economists in the audience. You also did highlight the financial gaps, as well as Parwanda also highlighted the challenges of financing this green energy transition. And our next speaker is somebody very expert at financing climate action, Mr. Sudhir Sharma, who is the task manager for the Global Environmental Fund, Climate Mitigation Asia and the Pacific, Energy and Climate Branch, Economy Division of the United Nations Environment Program. Mr. Sharma has had decades of experience working with the UNFCCC, the Asian Institute for Technology in Thailand, the Energy and Resources Institute, the Indira Gandhi Research of Development Institute, and is a Doctor of Economics from the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur. Mr. Sharma, welcome. You have 20 minutes and the platform is yours.
Thank you, Tiza. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this very interesting and important topic of climate change, as well as very impressed to see that we have a large audience here, or something like 500 young minds across different countries. So very happy to share my thoughts, and it's going to be a bit challenging with the wonderful presentations that have preceded me. Let me start with a little bit of give a couple of minutes on UN environment to begin with. So UN environment was set up as an a organization in 1972, followed the Rio outcomes to address the whole challenge of integrating, looking at the impacts on environment of development and seeing how actually development could be achieved, taking into account and minimizing or in fact reversing any negative impacts of environment, our key focus has been on science in terms of carrying out assessments of various environmental issues, their impacts, what can be done to address these issues. We prepare these assessment reports for the UN General Assembly, based on which the countries, the 192 countries, which are our bosses, then take decisions. So the UNEP's work has resulted in a number of conventions, the Climate Change Convention, the Biodiversity Convention, the Montreal Protocol related work, and UNEP also houses the secretariats of some of these conventions. So that's our main focus, but then taking it forward, UNEP also uses this science to then look at what are the solutions and how do those solutions help us move forward in addressing the issues. We work with a wide network of institutions, universities, because we are just about 1,200 colleagues. We cannot claim to have enough brains to generate all the knowledge. So we tap into all the immense energies and knowledge created across various institutions. Our role as a having the UN platform is to take this knowledge, digest it, and present it to the countries so that they can adopt it and implement it to integrate environment as an issue within their own development planning. IMS was introduced. Just a small correction, Tiza. I must congratulate to your team that you found all the information related to me, which the PhD is from IIT Idea, not IIT Kanpur, but otherwise quite impressive. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, I must say. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope that is visible. What I'll do is, I think my previous speakers have actually gone into detail, been more Indonesia-specific context, but I'll kind of present a more global perspective. And what you see on the screen is that we are in the process of developing. So the way UNEP works is that every 4 years, we carry out an assessment of what is the state of the world environment. And based on that, we lay out the strategy, which is called the medium-term strategy, of what actions the UNEP would be taking in assisting countries to meet the challenges that face us. So this is the latest strategy, which is being presented and being adopted by a United Nations Environment Assembly. So from our analysis, and one of the things that I would like to highlight in this figure is that the key underlying cause is essentially our unsustainable consumption and production patterns. Whether it is climate change, whether it is loss of biodiversity, whether it is pollution, air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, all these issues arise because our consumption patterns, our production patterns are unsustainable. And they are related. The climate action cannot be thought as purely as a global problem and therefore a problem that the developed country needs to solve. It's actually related to our actions and consequences that we face at national level as well. For example, unsustainable energy use or use of fossil fuel has impact across the spectrum. It leads to greater air pollution. We have seen our cities in Asia are heavily polluted because the use of oil in transport sector and other sources. The extraction of these resources results in destruction of forests. And we have seen one of the biggest consequences of that loss, which we have never been able to quantify, is this pandemic. So it is a shrinking space for animal life, which has resulted in increased probability of diseases jumping over into humans. And look at the economic cost, which was laid out by the first speaker, is what these unsustainable consumption patterns results in. And similarly, the use of fossil fuel then again leads to CO2 emissions and is causing climate action. So the point I would like to emphasize is that we should stop seeing these as separate set of environmental challenges or separate from development. These are actually a manifestation of the same challenge in different forms. So we need to address them in a comprehensive and in a coordinated and a synergistic manner, rather than think that, okay, we'll address today climate change, tomorrow we'll address biodiversity, and then we'll come back to pollution, or the other way around. So that's the key message that I wanted to give. The other key message that basically, if you look at the side of the window, the cube, we basically realize that we need to, and I think this was Dr. Venkatachalam also pointed out, we need to create knowledge and information and disseminate that. So science is very important for us to understand where we are headed and what the consequences would be. So we focus a lot on that. And our action should be based on science, governed by science, determined by science, yes, moderated by the need also of addressing human requirements. Now the science goes as far as only if we translate that into a good environmental governance. So formulating, and I think this was also a point which came up earlier, what it means is that governments use information to define their policies, integrate environmental aspects within their policy making processes, and strengthen the environmental governance process. Without that, it would be very difficult, one, to understand how our actions are kind of making us move in the right direction or not, and take further actions to improve it. The last one again came out. I think the next decades are going to be about digital transformation, very much related to cities. As Dr. Venkatachalam also mentioned, that is where most of our unsustainable consumption comes from, as most of us live in those city spaces. And this digital transformation does have a significant role to play in looking at how we design our economic activities, how we then design our cities, which could lead to reduced consumption and options which actually are much more sustainable. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think you have already seen this slide. So one of the science-related actions that we take every year, and is the most well-known flagship production of UN Environment Program, is the emissions gap report. Now, what I wanted to highlight here, I think this is, I would not spend too much time because this is something which has been already covered, is that there is a huge gap between what our NDC actions are, most of the countries have submitted, and what actually we need to be achieving. If you can see the gap between what will be achieved by the NDC actions which have been pledged till 2030, and what we need to, what is the level of GHG emission reductions that should be there in 2030, if we have to have a chance of keeping the increase in global temperature below 1.5 degree or up to 1.5 degree, is about 32 gigatons of GHG emissions. So there is a huge gap, and it basically means that our actions need to accelerate very quickly and rapidly. Otherwise, the chances that we would be able to, meet the Paris agreements diminish very fast. Now, some of the countries have already started taking key actions. Like if you look at European Union, New Zealand, UK, Japan has announced, they have not yet formally done so. South Korea, they have started putting a net zero target for 2050. And why is net zero for 2050 an important target? Because that gives us a fighting chance. If the global emissions do not return to net zero by 2050, it gives us a good fighting chance to keep the increase in temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, with the current NDCs, if we do not increase the ambition, the likelihood, which has been estimated by the various experts that engage in the emissions gap report, is that we will reach increase in temperature of 3 degrees by end of this century, that is 2100. So that is the scenario we're looking at it. And if you look at we already had the numbers which were presented by the previous speakers, the impact of climate change would be very significant So that is where I would actually like to add that to the equation, that when we look at the cost of taking mitigation action, we need to look at this other side, which is the benefits of taking those mitigation action, because mitigation actions are also an adaptation action. So that's very important. Two further points which I want to highlight, and some of us are very directly connected with this, is that a large part of the emissions are connected to our lifestyles. And we need to change our lifestyles. And I'll come back to that in the last slide, when what I mean by that. Basically, 2/3 of the global emissions are linked to private household consumption. So each and us, individual, everyone on this seminar has a role to play. It's not just the governments, it's not just the international community, it's not just the research institutes. It is actually each individual that has to understand, and I think Dr. Venkatechalam made a very good point, that we need to increase that awareness of what individuals can do and should do to fight this emission together. Just to highlight that point, 1% top income earners in the world account for 15% of GHG emissions. Their lifestyles account for 15% of GHG emissions. And the next 10% of the income earners account for 48% of the GHG emissions. And I think quite a few of us are in that 10%, I'm sure. So as individuals, we hold a large responsibility. Thank you so much. The next slide, please. Now, I would like to turn my attention to the most critical piece that if we have to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. This is the most challenging one. We have been very habituated to the use of coal, especially in this part of the world. It is going to take a lot of concentrated political will and action on part of everyone. But until we address this particular issue, we would not be able to meet the Paris Agreement goals. In line, as I mentioned, if we have to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, coal phase out by 2040 in power sector is the most critical element to be able to allow us to move towards that pathway. And because of that, the UN General Secretary gave a call that countries need to move forward by announcing a freeze on any new coal power plant post 2020, and then planning out of how the existing coal power plants would be slowly shut down by 2040. Now, why is it important in case of Asia, especially where I and you all are? 80% of the global coal is actually consumed in Asia. Asia is the fastest growing region, and it is the region where the emissions would grow fastest, despite the NDC actions. So we all have a role to play, and we need to address that particular issue. 2/3 of this coal demand is for power generation, and that's why the focus is on power generation to begin with, because their solutions exist. And most importantly, 95%. So you see, most of the other parts of the world have already started moving away from the coal. 95% of the new planned coal power plants are in Asia. Yes, it is not evenly distributed across countries. China and India are the two biggest contributors to it, but then so are most of the other countries. So if we have to address this challenge, Asia will be at the center of the focus. Right now, with the UK COP26 team, UN is working on what we call the Energy Transformation Panel, having dialogues. Indonesia is part of the dialogue, and I can answer some more questions on that later on. Now, so far, the coal was actually seen as an environmental issue related with land degradation, water depletion, water pollution, air pollution. But now, if you look at it is the economics of coal which actually makes it, it makes the point that why countries should move out of coal. 95 gigawatt of coal power plants in US have shut down. And you may all know that in the last 4 years, the last administration tried a lot to promote coal. But despite that, 95% of the coal power, 95 gigawatts of coal power plants shut down. Another 35 gigawatts are going to shut down in coming 3 to 4 years in US alone. Recently, Bangladesh also carried out an analysis and announced that they are not going to go forward with 9 planned coal power plants because, among other reasons, economics of the coal power plant doesn't make any sense. If you look at, and if you see the graph, and that's what I have presented, it's a study by IRENA, a sister organization. The renewable energy actually in most of the countries is now more competitive than coal power plant, coal electricity. And increasingly in countries like India, even including the investments in renewable, in battery storage, in grid strengthening, renewable power still comes out to be more competitive than coal power plant. So one of the challenges that countries who are investing in coal will face is that actually their cost of electricity supply would be much higher, making them economically incompetitive in the global export market, because they will be paying for a high cost energy compared to those countries which move over to renewable energy. So yes, there is a environmental issue, there is a climate change issue, but the important issue why we need to move out of coal is actually now the economics of it. And it is going to be a huge burden on the country budgets if countries continue with the coal power plant. The other flip side of it is that there is a lot of fossil fuel subsidy which is provided. Coal gets the biggest chunk of these subsidies. And if countries are looking for resources to divert towards renewable energy, this is a big set of resource to be utilized. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, I'll come down in my last slide from the two critical issues. The one is the most important is the coal, and we need to start that dialogue. And we in the UN have started the dialogue with the countries to see how we can help them plan and move out of it, because there is a socio-economic side to it as well. But the second side is in terms of the consumption patterns, the private individual consumptions. So there are three main areas where, and this connects very well with the earlier strategies that we talked about, that Dr. Venkatachalam talked about. One is mobility. A large part of mobility is connected with urban mobility. Yes, it is also connected with cargo mobility. But here, the lifestyle changes and mobility, moving over to electric vehicle using renewable energy, increasing fuel energy efficiency, increasing public infrastructure, increasing bicycling and walking infrastructure in the cities can significantly change the overall impact that mobility has. And it has a direct impact on air pollution in our cities. It has an impact on the congestions that we see in the cities. And congestion, there are a number of studies which have shown that how congestion actually lead to reduced GDP because of lost time in commuting. And this is where also the digital economy comes into place, which we have seen in action and been an important tool to deal with in the COVID shutdown period. The second biggest factor is our food consumption. Production is quite energy intensive, the modern food consumption. Plus, there is a lot of food wastage happening across the globe. And if we can actually move towards moving towards food, reducing drastically food wastage, moving towards food production which is less energy intensive and also more healthier, that will significantly reduce the GHG emissions. And that's again coming back, these are all individual choice-driven actions that we as individuals have to undertake. Yes, governments have a role to play in facilitating us and helping us in taking those decisions, but it is us individuals. And the last one is residential energy, which is a very significant amount of energy consumption, where again, we are looking at energy efficiency. And I would like to reiterate, energy efficiency is the cheapest form. Actually, it is a negative cost electricity and the cleanest source of electricity. there is a huge potential in energy reduction, which can be achieved through simple measures. If countries were to move in the Asia part to the same level of energy efficiency standards of just 5 appliances, lighting, air conditioners, refrigerators, motors, and transformers, 5 to 7% less electricity would be required per year. So you can see the impact that can immediately be achieved. And again, there are a lot of policy programs like labeling, which has come out, and it gives us a choice as individuals to choose that we only go for the most efficient products. We go for low carbon energy or renewable energy. So to summarize, the next slide, please. To summarize my intervention, the key points that I would like to highlight is that we should not look at climate change as a separate problem. It is a problem associated with the nature of our development and its impact within our local environment as well as our natural resources. So we need to tackle it in an integrated manner. A large part of it, governments have a role to play, and international bodies like UNEP have a role to play. But it cannot happen till a full participation of individuals, and individuals have a much larger role because, as I mentioned, 3/4 of the emissions are driven by private lifestyle choices. So that is important. And finally, coal is the critical link to achieving the Paris Agreement goals. And it is not, the thing that we are saying now is not, it is not because of environment or climate change alone that we need to get out of coal, because being invested in coal would also mean significant economic losses going forward. And the last point I would say is that basically countries should look at transforming and taking transformational actions and investment in that as an investment in avoiding the climate change impact losses, which are going to face us, as one of the presenters mentioned, that by 2050 we would have up to 2% of the GDP reduction every year, and that's a very significant amount of GDP reduction. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and sharing UNEP's work and thoughts in this very, very important issue. Back to you, Tisa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, for your insight. And I'd like to come away from that amazing presentation by highlighting what Mr. Sharma himself said could not be emphasized enough. This staggering statistic that 80% of global coal is consumed in the Asian continent, and that the most critical pathway towards achieving levelized or reduced global emissions is by phasing out coal by 2040, or was it 2050? And that not doing so would present countries with significant investment and economic risks. I could not think of a better person to go deeper into these issues than our next speaker, Mr. Archandra Tahar, Pak Archandra Tahar, who is the former Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia and is currently the President Commissioner at PT Perusahaan Gas Negara. Mr. Archandra needs no introduction, but Pak Archandra is also well known for having spent decades in the United States leading oil and gas industries. Pak Archandra has a PhD in ocean engineering from Texas A&M University. Pak Archandra, the floor is yours. Welcome on board. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tiza. Speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Please allow me to share my presentations. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the committee who have organized such an amazing program and invited me to share my perspective on this climate breakdown. My task as the last speaker is going to be difficult because all issue has been covered by the speaker. But I'll try to do my best. I will focus on the energy transition and how the oil and gas industry respond to the issue of climate change. as well as different strategy among the oil companies. A roadmap of several countries, which has laid down their target and energy mix, are also presented. Indonesia, without exceptions, has decided to participate in energy transition through regional and also international cooperation. My presentations start with an idea of pivoting point in which business entity such as oil industry plan their strategy by exploring product technology and method. As shown in this figure, where there are different life cycle stages, the old, the now, and the new. This is inspired by the Accenture book, Pivot to the Future. And the old, in this figure, the stage where the company has product, technology, and method that have reached the peak of their growth and near the end of their life. The now is the stage where the company is investing in the most successful products, technologies, and method. The new is the stage where the company come up with the disruptions, product, technology, and method. These three life cycle stages can be used to manage the energy transitions and to measure how the oil industry respond to the climate change issue. Next slide, please. In this slide, we will talk about the trade values, which can be used by the oil companies to come up with the environmentally friendly product and services. The above figure shows the pace change of technology and the speed where the change is being realized and are diverging. More value creation is hidden because of the speed of the technology evolution. On the other hand, the business evolutions that create value creations evolve slowly. The mismatch between the speed of technology and the business evolutions create the trade value gap. The faster technology improves, the faster the gap widens. It means the greater the urgency where the oil company must adopt a new strategy to reduce the adverse effect of the climate change. We do hope there will be a big bang disruptions of product and services in the oil and gas industry that can help the climate change issue. Next slide, please. Now, let me ask the audience about what we believe so far. Who believe that the oil and gas industry is near the end of their glory? Some of us might think about it. In the near future, there is no oil and gas industry anymore. But let's take a look at the data here. According to the organizations of the petroleum exporting country, or OPEC, the oil demand in 2020 is around 90.7 million barrels per day, where the road transportations still remains the major contributor to overall demand. Surprisingly, the demand keeps going up to reach 109 million barrels per day in 2045. So increased by around 19 million barrels per day in 25 years. Of course, we do understand massive growth of traffic and corresponding fuel demand will be offset by engine efficiency and fuel switch to electricity, gas, and biofuel. Fuel efficiency, according to this data from OPEC and the Wood Mackenzie, increasing electric vehicle cause transportation fuel demand to peak in 2030. However, based on this data again, electric vehicle is predicted to displace only 6 million barrels of oil per day in 2040, or it's about 6% of total demand. And increasing by 19 million barrels per day, displaced only by 6 million barrels per day. It is not encouraging yet, isn't it? But this is data from OPEC and Wood Mackenzie. It's not from myself. So that's the reality. Let's take a look at next slide, please. How about the LNG supply and demand? The outlook depicted in this picture, global LNG price, of course, had fallen at all-time low in 2020 due to the lower demand and oversupply. Low prices expected to delay ongoing construction projects that may reduce supply. We do understand this problem. However, by 2030, the long-term supply demand is predicted to be widened and need more than 100 million tons per annum of LNG supply. Qatar project may help fulfill some demand. However, there is about 70 million tons per annum shortage in 2030. So from oil and gas perspective, crude, for example, still in demand, and LNG, same thing, still in demand for the next 10 or 20 years. How about the LNG prices? In this slide, we can see the Asia spot LNG price. The long-term contract tend to be lower, while the next slide, please. Yes, yeah, the long-term contract price tend to be lower, while the spot price tend to be higher. Because of COVID-19, the construction schedule of LNG projects are overrun by 20% on average. However, the project still ongoing, and at the speed where we believe in 2020 and 30, the shortage of the LNG can be replaced by other projects. Next slide, please. Now we talk about the petrochemical. The last 3 slides, we talk about oil, and then LNG, and now petrochemical. How about the outlook of petrochemical products? Stronger than expected. The demand level helped through COVID-19 for ethylene, polyethylene, and polypropylene. For the next 5 years, as shown in this figure, the growth of petrochemical product is in a positive level with growth rate around 5% up to 2025. Beyond 2025, what the industry believes, the petrochemical product still in demand. So the growth still there, but how long? Until someday the greener product can replace the petrochemical product in our needs for the future. Next slide, please. How about the merger and acquisition activities in oil and gas? This is a kind of indicator whether the industry is still in demand or will be on the at the sunset stage of that life cycle. In Southeast Asia, ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips offer their asset to the market. That's true. What are the reasons of those companies offering their asset to the market? Is it because of the energy transition or other reasons beyond business perspective? We need to watch this merger and acquisitions activities closely because it will impact the roadmap of energy transitions. The last 3 speakers has talked about this issue, but look at what the oil and gas industry respond to the issue. Next slide, please. How about the Indonesia? Let's take a look on the proven oil reserve in Indonesia. Our proven reserve is only 0.2% of proven reserve worldwide. Our fuel product demand is around 1.4 million barrels per day, and import crude and fuel product is around 600,000 barrels per day. So think about it, our proven reserve and our demand for import fuel product and crude. So our country is net importer country and need more oil to fulfill our demand domestically. Next slide, please. How about the gas? Slightly different from proved oil reserve. The proved gas reserve in Indonesia represents 1.4% of total reserve worldwide. Russia has the most reserve, Iran, Qatar, Turkmenistan, US, and so on. So in terms of gas, the Indonesian's reserve is better than oil. And by 2021, 70% of our gas production is for domestic use, and while the rest is for the export. Now we talk about energy transitions for oil and gas industry. Look at figure on the left. Two different strategies between the US oil companies and the European. The upper corner of that figure, the European company focus on energy diversifications by diversifying their business into renewable energy. They shifted their business from oil and gas. On the other hand, the US company on the lower part of that quadrant focus on decarbonizations of the existing portfolio. As shown at the figure on the right, the diversifications of their existing business may not be a priority in the near future. So the priority is going to be decarbonization through, for example, carbon capture, utilization, storage. The different strategy may impact the roadmap of the energy transitions in the future. Next slide, please. How about the country policy for energy, renewable energy? The previous speaker have talked about that target. First, let's see UK. Set a target 50% of their energy mix coming from renewable energy in 2030 and reach zero net greenhouse gas emissions in 2050. Germany, 60% of renewable in 2030 and reach zero net greenhouse gas emission in 2050. China set 20% of non-fossil fuel in 2030 and reach zero net greenhouse gas emissions in 2060. Japan, South Korea, India have similar commitment for the energy mix with different target in different year. And most of the strategies are related to phase out of using coal power plant. Next, new energy portfolio, offshore wind and solar PV are emerging as favorite for the European oil company. Equinor of Norway focus on installing the offshore wind as the main choice of their energy diversifications, while Total, for example, from France, focus on the solar PV. It looks like the US major put some effort on carbon capture and utilization storage, and others use CO2 to enhance their oil recovery. So instead of diversifying their business into renewable energy, the US company focus on to mitigate the impact of carbon into our climate change. That's two different strategies. It can be seen how our company set a different strategy to deal with the climate change. Which one will give the best impact? Time will prove in the future. Next slide, please. How about Indonesia? We have some program on renewable energy development, but we are facing challenges. The first challenge, talking about project financing, with higher interest rate being charged by local bank, could be around 10 or 11%. And with the internal rate of returns around 15%, there is a spread about 4%, but that's not enough. It will make electricity tariff less competitive if we put higher internal rate of return on the renewable energy project. The second issue, talking about permits, investor may deal with the complexity of bureaucracy in local government. However, new law passed by the House of Representatives, Omnibus Law, might help to ease the complexity of the bureaucracy. The third issue, land acquisition. Sometimes it is not easy to get land acquisitions and land clearance. A lot of issue about this land acquisition. And the number four, smart grid. The National Electricity Company, PLN, does not have a smart grid yet. It will make penetrations of intermittent power supply from wind and solar PV difficult. And the last not least, tax and fiscal incentive. The early Pak Febrio talk about how the government provide some tax and fiscal incentive for the green technology, including renewable energy. Next. We talk about the energy security strategy for Indonesia. Since 2004, Indonesia became the net importer country. As mentioned before, Indonesia import oil as much as 600,000 barrels per day, which make the Indonesians' energy security vulnerable. That's what we call it foreign-based supply, because 600,000 barrels of import oil coming from overseas. It could be from Middle East or West Africa. The vulnerability of energy supply can be cured by a domestic-based supply strategy. So we have to shift our strategy from foreign-based supply to domestic-based supply. The strategy can be implemented through, first, keep investing strategically in oil and gas business through, for example, short-term, improve oil recovery, mid-terms, enhance oil recovery, long-term through explorations. A little bit different view from other speaker, because we are a net importer country. We still need oil and gas for our economic development. And the second, build and improve the refinery and petrochemical plants. And the third one, increase portions of biofuel. We do agree about this. And build a city gas to reduce LPG import. And number four, implement conversions of fuel to natural gas for power plants. Natural gas is considered to be cleaner than coal. Number five, strategically invest into renewable energy to achieve our target 23% of energy mix in 2025. And number six, encourage people to use electric vehicle and electric stove. And the last but not least, involved in technology development such as battery. We do hope the above program may help Indonesia to achieve their energy security in the future and help to achieve the environmental sustainability for the world. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. A question for all of us, including the audience and also speaker. Where are we now? The example of the old life cycle initiative, in this case, are primary productions in oil and gas, soon will be fading away. And second, the example of the now life cycle initiative are secondary and tertiary productions in oil and gas, shale oil and shale gas, petrochemical, refinery, all what we call it with the now life cycle. And the example of the new life cycle initiative are renewable energy, electric vehicle, electric stove, biofuel, and battery. Where are we right now? We can stand on the old or the now or at the new. Let's think about it. Where are we right now? And then let's move forward to help our Earth more livable than ever. Thank you very much. Back to you, Tiza.
Thank you very much, Pak Archandra. Thank you for highlighting those facts, the stark details about how oil and gas products demand keeps going up. Not, as some would believe, a sunset industry, which really highlights the challenges that we face in achieving a green energy transition and reducing emissions. But as also Pak Archandra pointed out, there are different pathways towards energy transition and achieving energy security, and I think this is the most. This will be, an interesting topic for the young economists in the audience to delve deeper into in their research and future careers. Thank you very much, all the speakers. We will now move to the question and answer session, and we have a collection of very interesting questions already from the audience. I will start with a question for Pak Ruanda. Pak Ruanda, are you still here, Pak? Pak Ruanda, are you still here? Perhaps while we wait for Pak Ruanda, I'll move on to a question for Mr. Anbu. The question is, which country do you believe has the biggest impact in being a role model of emissions reduction, and how, what actions did that country do? And I would like to also add, if we could frame it in terms of both global countries and within ASEAN, that would be very interesting for the Indonesian and ASEAN audience. Please, Mr. Anbu. I think you're still on mute. We can't hear your voice yet.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and it is a very inspiring question, and the thing is where we can find the inspirations for the climate actions, particularly the question is more on the mitigation. And my take for this is the Costa Rica, and the country that is a small, plenty of natural resources and the mineral resources. But if you take the past 20 years, they have taken up a lot of measures to go for the zero emission growth. And this emission growth comes in finding the market value for their forest resources, and as well as this saving the minerals. I think this is one where that is any country, though it is a small country, but it is an open for these technologies and also market mechanisms where we can find the innovations. And other two inspirations that is where we can find at the global level is one is German's energy wind program. That is a reformative program that basically targeted for 100% renewables and maximum of energy efficiency. And this basically, the past 2 decades, this manufacturing, particularly carbon intensity of German and also the Japan, it is maximized. So these are the 3 examples. That is where we can find a reference case and where we can find a benchmarking to move forward. When coming to this region, and we do find a lot of initiatives, and I think we are not silent, and we need to acknowledge, and we are doing it. We did it basically starting from the Copenhagen Bridges and these NDCs comes. For example, Indonesia, and they brought this new agenda of peat soil in this NDC agenda, and it is moving up. And this targets has been moving up, this biofuel program. So there is a lot to dig in it, but say for example in Thailand also they have the renewable energy program. There is a new financial mechanisms. How this revolving fund, basically they collected from the tax revenues used for promoting the new type of industries, particularly small and medium-sized renewables. So plenty of things has been done, and but we need to move forward and with more ambitious targets, and we need to also understand these realities, hard realities. This climate change mitigation is a not simple task. We do have a kind of a big elephant in the room. That is the fossil fuel. I think Pak Chandra also mentioned about it, and how we can find a new value for it, and what would be the best mix, and whether we have the proposal, anything for it, like Germany did it, and now US is moving forward it, and for example, and Singapore is now investing a lot on this floating solar and the cross-border interconnectivity. There are a lot of opportunities available, but this movement, and we need much more engagement with the private sector, who is providing the solutions, and as well as the source of the finance for all these things. I stop here. I will come back to you later.
Very much, Mr. Anbu. I would like to now move to a question for Mr. Sharma. We previously heard from Archandra that some of the companies, particularly the US-based companies, are opting for an energy transition pathway that's based more on decarbonization. The question here is related to that, I think. So the question is, what other solutions in terms of technology can actually contribute to solve the climate crisis that is viable? What about bioenergy? What about carbon capture and storage? And what about changing our own consumption habits? Is that going to be impactful?
Thank you so much. Thanks for the question. Let me start with the last one first. As I highlighted in my presentation, 2/3 of GHG emissions are related to our consumption patterns. How do we use transport? What kind of appliances do we use? What kind of materials do we use? What kind of a house do we buy? Because all of that has a connection to use in energy, and that energy mostly currently comes from GHG emissions. So yes, I think some of the simple tips that we can talk about, which individuals can start adapting in ASEAN countries especially, we already have labeling programs for appliances. And number 5 label is the most efficient in most of the countries. So basically, if we can make choices for picking up the most efficient appliances, reducing our food wastage, choosing to use public transport instead of using private vehicles. So these are some of the consumption pattern changes which can actually help us individually to move towards reducing our own carbon footprint, because we also, each of us have a carbon footprint. In terms of moving at the technologies, I think that's a lot of them have been laid out. Biomass is definitely a good mix for ASEAN countries. The key challenge there is that we should not get into biomass where it actually again starts resulting in deforestation or diversion of food production. So that's one of the aspects of biomass that has to be kept in mind, but it's an important part of energy mix. I think Professor Venkatachalam, Dr. Venkatachalam talked about the energy efficiency. I think the most important steps that we need to take in any field is energy efficiency. There are a huge number of measures that can be taken, whether it is fuel efficiency in the vehicles, whether it is energy efficiency in the industry, it's energy efficiency of appliance use, because this not only saves us money, but it also saves a lot of investment which would otherwise go in creating power generation plants or extraction plants for oil, coal, and other resources. So there's a lot of savings that can happen in that. Coming back to, yes, you're right that some of the US, Europe also tried. In fact, Europe had one of the largest programs on funding carbon capture and storage, and they realized that actually it is not a viable program to move into carbon capture and storage. It does increase the total amount of cost that would be required per unit of energy delivered. So therefore, you see Europe has actually moved away from that and diversification. And two important elements which ASEAN can copy from Europe is huge connectivity of transmission grids among the countries. That would definitely help countries in using resources from other countries, and that could help move away from coal-based power specifically and other fossil fuel energy consumption. If you look at most of the studies which are coming out, and let me quote one study especially which was done by Tata Power, which owns a large number of coal power plants. They internally have analyzed and come to a conclusion that for them, shutting down 15 to 20 year old coal power plants and replacing them with renewable will increase the company's profits. So they are now in the process of actually moving in that direction. So that is kind of one of the key. The previous speaker talked about grid integration that is happening. If you look at Europe, they have reached very high level of renewable energy integration. And these things are not something which will happen overnight. So the point is that we need to start planning for these things now. If we don't plan for them now, then we would start missing the bus. And there are a lot of technologies, there are a lot of studies, like McKinsey's study for Vietnam indicated Vietnam could increase its renewable energy from 18 gigawatt that it has planned till by 2030 to 87 gigawatt. And including the cost of battery storage and including the cost of grid strengthening, it would still be cheaper to put in place that level of renewable energy and stop using coal as a main source of energy. So in that sense, I think the developments which are taking on the battery storage side, the developments which are taking on the smart grid technology side, in our assessment, that would make carbon capture and storage actually a more costlier option. And possibly markets would not pick that as an option going forward. I'll stop there. I hope I answered all the questions that you had.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I think that succinctly answers the question. And you made a little metaphor there on how if we don't plan now, we're going to miss the bus. That's a great metaphor for our next question, which is about vehicles. So, Pak Archandra, in light of what you presented today on how Indonesia still needs oil and gas because our transportation system is very largely dependent on that. The question here is about green vehicles. So how can automotive companies and governments work together to make better facilities to push for the mainstreaming of green vehicles?
Oh, thank you, Tiza. Let me touch a subject about coal power plant in Indonesia related to the issue of green technology. We have a different issue in Indonesia. If you look at in 2014, our electrification ratio is around 88%. By the end of 2019, we can achieve at the level of 98, 99% of the electrification ratio. What is our issue in Indonesia? First is about accessibility. Sometimes it's difficult for the remote island to get the electricity for the people. And what is the second issue? Affordability. Yeah. Why Indonesia opt to use 50% of their energy mix coming from coal power plant because of the issue of affordability. You can imagine that someone who were born in remote area, for example, never get in their life the luxury of having electricity at their house. You can imagine that. How can we make our society better while they don't have an electricity to educate themselves, to allow them to have the opportunity to learn during the night? That's the big issue. So on the energy transition, we believe that coal power plant at one point, yes, will be phased out at certain point, but currently we needed to educate our people, to give an access for the people in order to change the status of their economic status. Because of lack of education, there is no access for the electricity during the night. That's the big issue. And related to the questions about the green technology on the electric vehicle, in the strategy of the energy security that I laid down before, if you look at it, we have to change it from domestic-based supply into, from foreign-based supply into domestic-based supply. What does it mean? The source of energy that we had so far, the natural resources, one thing is electricity. In terms of electricity, we don't need to import it. We can fulfill our demand of electricity. But in terms of fossil fuel, we have to import it. So the strategy is, first, we encourage people to support the program of electric vehicle. That's not easy. The issue of electric vehicle is related to the infrastructure. Sometimes the industry convey the message to us, well, we're going to build the electric vehicle. The problem is there is no infrastructure, the charging station and so on. And those who provide the infrastructure will reply saying that, well, we will provide the infrastructure, where is the EV? So this is kind of chicken egg, an egg between the infrastructure and EV itself. So when we are talking about the green technology, we encourage that EV is one of the best solutions to help to manage the climate change issue for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Chandra. We have another round of questions we still have time for. Pak Rwanda conveys his apologies that he couldn't join the Q&A session because he had to be called into a meeting with the minister. And so we have another round of questions. And so just following up from what Pak Archandra said on how it's like a chicken and egg situation between waiting for infrastructure and waiting for the vehicles, I'd like to turn this next question to Mr. Anbu. With regard to green recovery, is there an opportunity for green recovery to kind of push, these barriers away, for example, to have them focus on building green infrastructure. What is your opinion on green recovery in that regard? Or will it actually cause delay? Will the pandemic actually cause delay to the green economic programs that we envision?
Thank you. And as I told in my opening note, and this pandemic is a kind of once in a generation opportunity to bring in these long-term ambitious goals into short-term recovery. And this has been realized in some countries. And for example, EU has their new Green Deal. And of course, they started this negotiations before this pandemic. They took it as an opportunity. They unveiled a package of about 23 trillion and developing these new green infrastructure and new green jobs, and also developing a new type of industries. That kind of momentum that we need to look for it. And this has been followed. And during the pandemic also, economies like Japan and China, the Korea, and they have introduced these new net zero emission strategies. Still, it has to be filtered out. And here there is a momentum and momentum for moving towards this net zero and taking this green recovery and the stimulus packages. In 2018, it happened at the global level. At the time, US provided, President Obama provided that leadership. Then it was taken up by countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Korea and Japan. And here, at present, we don't find that kind of global leadership to take that momentum, and only EU shows the sign. So here, as a region as a whole, and ASEAN has this ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Plan. Basically, for me, it is not a going back to this business as usual. It is a kind of finding a new way to all these 10 economies to move forward. So here, I think it is an opportunity and should not be missed. But again, we see that is where that is the solutions should come from. Basically, it lies on two areas, and one is the technology, and second thing is the finance. These two windows has to be opened together. I think Pak Chandra knows better than me about how difficult it is at the macro level. So we need to find the ways to open these windows of green technology and the green finance to open together. That need a building capacity for the financing sector as well as the private sector. And the third one is, as Sudhir mentioned, and where we eventually look for. One is the supply side. That is, we need to find the best energy mix at the national level, at the regional level. That needs further innovations and further looking deep inside what are the different hurdles that is faced. Second point is the demand side. We know that is the technology and finance lies with the private sector, but they don't have the sentiments and they don't have the emotions. So how the sentiments and the emotions could be stimulated? It comes from the consumer demand. And if you go to the market, there exists, for example, the best example is the recycling battery, that is the rechargeable battery. And we also have the alkaline battery. Both they exist together. It can be either removed by regulation or it could be removed by the consumer demand. So here we need to take the hard choice. This alkaline battery industry may die, but it will create a new opportunity for a rechargeable battery. The same goes with these electric vehicles. When we need to give up one sector, that is in this game of climate change or the green recovery, there is no complete losers and winners. We do have both the winners and the losers. How we are going to compensate for these losers? That is a big question. And we need to tackle it. And I think we are in the right move. In the case of ASEAN, this ACRF as a kind of blueprint, gives a kind of broader map, and we need to look into it. And I am in favor of it. And again, I'm emphasizing it is a once in a generation opportunity to make hard decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anbu. My next question is for Mr. Sharma. Mr. Anbu said this is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for this generation. So in a sense, we can actually, this is an opportunity to change that business as usual projection, to force the change somehow. In terms of phasing out coal in Asian countries, how do you think is clear or best pathways to either force the reduction of the supply or the reduction of the demand for coal in order for it to be phased out without really impacting, the economy that's already in a recession as it is?
Thanks. I think the answer already has been given by Dr. Venkatachalam, because you can't look at either or. The either or is not the option. It's a mix of options that we need to go for, and we need to look at. There are scales of options. So there are options which are technically feasible and economically viable. So you look at all those options which are already available on the plate. So as Dr. Venkatachalam mentioned, if you look at the EU Green Deal, and even if you look at the 2008 recovery plan, I think, that's a good point I should make. So you see, today we see wind and solar costs have significantly gone down. If you go back, in 2008, both US under the Obama administration and EU, the recovery package that they created for recovering from the financial crisis invested heavily into wind and solar and invested heavily into energy efficiency of buildings. And you see the result of that over the 10 years, that actually the price has fallen so dramatically that it has become a very competitive renewable energy. Solar and wind have become very competitive. So Dr. Venkatachalam is exactly right, because the governments are spending money. It is not that they are not going to spend money. They need to spend money to kickstart the economy, to recover and get the economy back on the path. Now the choice is whether we keep spending on the same old options or do we look at the new options. And I think what he's saying is exactly right, is that if we take this opportunity, the once in lifetime opportunity of investing in future options, it will help not only in terms of kind of addressing climate change and other environmental issues, but also a faster economic recovery. If you see, renewable energy has a much shorter gestation period of creating projects. Energy efficiency, there could be programs, and if you look at Europe, there was a myth that if we set very high energy efficiency standards, then the cost of economy will go up. I don't have that diagram immediately. I can find it and send it to you so that you can share with the audience. If you look at the time when they started with their energy efficiency standards, and you will look at the cost of appliances, actually energy efficiency has pushed down the cost of appliances because private sector comes in and realizes that this is the future, and they start out-competing each other in coming out with more and more efficient products. So it is a myth to say that it is very high cost and it will continue to stay high cost. What is required is a signal from the government. If the government starts investing in those signals, the private sector immediately gets a signal that, okay, this is where our profits are going to come from. This is where we need to invest in our R&D. And it leads to future reduction in prices. So I would say it's a mix. Right now, ASEAN countries have abundant solar resources. Indonesia is one of the richest in solar resources. And as my friend was saying, if you look at smaller islands, and we've been doing some work in other places, actually decentralized renewable energy is much better, along with energy efficient appliances, to supply energy and meet the developmental needs, than to build up an infrastructure which is connected to grid. But energy efficiency has to lead. Energy efficiency, technologies are there in the market. What it requires is the political willingness from the government to put in place standards and put in place incentive structures. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. But Archandra, this question is for you. Mr. Sharma brought up how governments need to invest in new technologies and research and development. Conversely, the Indonesian government is now investing in nickel mining, because renewables are going up, electric vehicles are going up. The Indonesian government sees an opportunity to grab the battery market. So this next question is about batteries. Mining nickel, mining lithium itself causes pollution in the surrounding government, so there are risks as well, but there are also opportunities. Now, what do you think are the risks and opportunities of investing in these new raw materials for batteries?
That's, I do believe, that's good initiative, battery technology. What else I believe? Those who can invent or come up with the new technology that can have the life cycle or the lifetime of the battery can be last longer. For example, instead of 500, 1,000 cycle charge and recharge, and come up with example again, 20,000 cycle or last about 20 years. This is one example. Those people could be nominated as Nobel laureate in the future. Why? The enablement of the electric vehicle depend on how well we come up with the EV technology. Nickel is one thing, nickel cadmium, lithium ion, vanadium, those kind of technology may help to increase the charge and recharge cycle of the battery. However, can we come up for the future for the technology development that can increase the cycle of the battery? That's the key issue of the EV battery. I do agree, we have so much natural resources related to nickel, but the technology, how to come up with a smelter, greener and cheaper, and of course, help our country to participate in or to achieve the environmental sustainability. But related to the issue of technical and commercial, before Mr. Sharma talking about technically feasible, commercially viable, but I need to add one more, politically acceptable. Why? If you look at the United States as an example, all due respect, when we look at the strategy, how Democrats and Republicans respond to the climate change has a different strategy actually, yeah. But of course, country per country, yeah, each country has a different strategy. They set it based on, for example, the promise during the campaign, and they need to fulfill that one. And that's issue, the last issue about politically acceptable must be considered when we set up a strategy for the green technology in one country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Chandra. This has been a very rich and insightful conversation. I just wanted to have one last round of closing remarks to answer just one question in maybe 30 seconds for our audience. What role can the new generation of young economists play in this new world where the climate crisis has become the defining crisis of this generation? I believe many of you touched upon this in your presentations, but just one final remark to close off the event, starting with Mr. Anbu.
Yeah, we need to write a book about it, and because this young generation, you are the futures. And we need to admit the fact that is we as an adults failed to make the change. So I appeal to all these young generation people and be focused on innovation, be creative, and you are the solutions and you are the future leaders. So these innovations can come in 3 areas. One is creating this technological innovation. I think you are much more capable and you have the access to that information. Second thing is the business innovation, how you can make it profit while preserving this environment and the planet. There is a plenty of opportunities available, and we know that is about 60% of the technologies are already available that can reduce the vulnerability, and they can reduce or they can control the emissions. But still they are not coming into the market because they lack the business model. So you need to innovate the business models. Third one is the commit yourself for the lifestyle, and plenty of opportunities are available, and you don't need to make the same mistakes our generation did it. We are crazy about the things, and we need to then we basically landed up in this started from this industrial revolution. Now we are the fourth industrial revolution. The technologies can be a solution, and you can make the technologies, the digital technologies, still it has been expanding like anything during this pandemic period. We had seen that is the nearly 10 years has been compressed into 1 year to see it. So this thing kind of revolution can happen, and it needs creativity and your lifestyle changes. There are plenty of opportunities are already there. And then again, that is what Dr. Sharma mentioned, the political willingness. You are the leaders and you have the command, and with your demand, you can dictate the terms for the business and the governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anbu. Mr. Sharma?
Thank you so much. I would say that, yes, it's actually the topic today we are talking about is about the young generation. We have lived our lives, and they will be the one to face the consequences. So the leadership on addressing this has to be in their hand, and they actually can influence. I fully agree. In economics and in profits, it is the demand which channels which way the private investment would go. So you have a huge amount of power in your hand. But one key element, which Professor Venkatechalam also touched, is about how do we influence lifestyle choices change. And I think if we can get into the, some of you could take up the research of not only what is a good policy, what is a good regulation, what is a good set of incentive, but how do, what are the tools? What are the kind of social actions that can actually create people to make the right choices? I think that's an area, and I think that connects with what my friend said about political willingness. Political willingness comes from when people vote and make people change, and that's how democratic government came in, and Trump had to leave the office. So I think it's that area of research has not been focused on enough. And since my young friends are here, I would say please pick up that area and see that what could those tools be which influence the lifestyle choices among masses. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Pak Chandra, silakan Pak.
The youngster, there is no bulletproof strategy that can be applied across the country. And if you look at my presentation, technology evolved quicker than the business. There is a trade value gap that you can explore to come up with a new method, new services, new technology that can help we achieve the environmental sustainability. Sharpen the pencil, grease the wheel, and get off on the right foot. Let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Chandra. Thank you very much to Mr. Anbu, Mr. Sharma, and Pak Chandra, Pak Ruwanda, all the distinguished speakers for their insight. Thank you very much for the audience, for the continued engagement and excellent questions throughout this discussion. Hope we meet again for future discussions, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
this marks the end of the moderated session. Before we move on, we would like to remind the audience that the link to the attendance has already been distributed in our Zoom chat and YouTube live chat. Now, we would like to give a token of appreciation to our speakers and moderator.
Therefore, we kindly invite Kevin Bagasatria as the Chief Executive Officer of the 18th Economix to give the certificates to our first speaker, Mr. Ruanda Agung Sugardiman.
Mr. Ruan, thank you very much for such insightful speech. It was unfortunate that you could not attend the discussion, but yet we made sure that your messages was truly delivered in the speech. Thank you, Mr.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Ruanda Agung Sugardiman. On to our next speaker, Mr. Venkatachalam Anbumozi.
Mr. Anbumoji, thank you very much for delivering such a comprehensive and insightful presentation. And also thank you for involvement in all of our discussions and our event. And therefore, please receive a token of appreciation.
We would like to express our gratitude once more to Mr. Venkatachalam Anbumozi.
Moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Sudhir Sharma.
Mr. Sudhir Sharma, thank you very much for the presentation. With you, we explore the aftermath of the climate change and about the coal phasing out by 2040 and other discussions. And for that, I will thank you very much for that.
Again, thank you, Mr. Sudhir Sharma.
Proceeding to our next speaker, Mr. Archanda Tahar.
Mr. Archandra, thank you very much for such deep knowledge, especially in connecting between the current oil and gas-based economy into a more sustainable economy in the future, which may be the key knowledge for bridging the now and the future. And for that, please receive our token of appreciation. Thank you, Pak Archandra.
Yet again, we give our thanks to Mr. Archandra Tahar.
And finally, our remarkable moderator, Ms. Tiza Mafira.
Dear Ms. Tiza Mafira, your way of moderating was truly exceptional, leading our academic discussion into a very fun yet very engaging session. And for that, I would like to thank you very much, Ms. Tiza. Please receive our token of appreciation. Thank you, Ms. Tiza.
Once again, thank you, Ms. Tiza Mafira. Lastly, we would like to express our most sincere appreciation to our exceptional moderator and speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally reached the end of today's event. We are very pleased to guide you through today's inspiring seminar sessions.
We really hope that today's seminar will give you beneficial knowledge resulting in new ideas to overcome the global economic challenges.
Thank you for the audience, especially our distinct guests, speakers, and participants of the 18th Economix.
Not to forget, we would like to also thank our main sponsor, Bridgestone, and all our sponsors and media partners who have supported this event.
First, Bridgestone Tire Indonesia,
Fiesta Nugget, rasakan enaknya setiap hari,
Vale Indonesia,
Lingo Talk,
Bank Syariah Indonesia,
Fitbar,
Ajaib,
Ilunia VBUI,
Widji,
Studio Rahel,
Databox,
Treats by Walking Drums,
Hengri,
King Snack Pack,
BNI Sekuritas,
Epson,
Bank Indonesia, and our official research partner, Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia,
Lembaga Penyelidikan Ekonomi dan Masyarakat FEBUI.
Last but not least, we'd also like to thank our official media partner, Trans7 and our other media partners.
Trans TV,
CNN,
Net TV,
Metro TV,
Medcom.id,
Detik.com,
Tempo,
Kumparan,
O Channel,
Kontan,
Merdeka.com,
Liputan 6,
Stabilitas,
Kata Data,
Good News from Indonesia,
Media Indonesia,
Infobank,
Greeners,
Info Seminar,
Bumi Buddies,
Greeneration Foundation,
Teens Go Green,
Forest is Our Friend,
Natural News,
Saya Pilih Bumi,
Cerita Iklim,
Sustainable Indonesia,
Event Banget,
BO Economica,
and last but not least, Earth Hero ID.
Thank you everyone for your attendance in this year's 18th Economix seminar. We would like to bid farewell.
I am Muhammad Irza Shahyanra.
And I'm Kianka Azura.
Spirit, and see you at the 19th Economix.
Bridgestone is on a journey toward a more sustainable society. Together with our suppliers and partners, we are determined to pioneer new innovations that deliver value to our customers and the world, improving the way people move, live, work, and play. The global demand for rubber is rising, and we must rise to meet that challenge responsibly. As a global leader providing sustainable mobility and advanced solutions, Bridgestone is working toward 100% sustainable materials at every point of our supply chain by 2050 and beyond. This journey will not be easy, but it will be acted on with the utmost consideration for how we procure our materials, the natural resources we use, and the impact our productivity has on the communities of the people we buy and source from. Our founder, Shojiro Ishibashi, believed in serving society with superior quality. This belief is not only about the products we make, but the legacy we leave behind. It is our way to serve, shaping our continued global compliance, instilling in us a commitment to environmental stewardship, motivating our respect for human rights and fair labor, and emboldening our commitment to increase transparency and engagement with partners. Inspired by our founder's vision, our way to serve will allow us to see long-term environmental, social, and economic value for all our stakeholders at every touch point of our interaction with the world around us. Through our way to serve and its layers of impact, enhancing mobility, supporting people and communities, and advancing environmental stewardship, we will set an example for our industry, lead in sustainable mobility, and provide lasting value to how we conduct our lives today, tomorrow, and into the future. Bridgestone and its partners are on a journey.
PT Vale adalah perusahaan tambang nikel kelas dunia. Di Indonesia, penambangan dan pengolahan PT Vale mencakup 3 provinsi di Pulau Sulawesi. Dengan sistem penambangan berupa open cast mining dan sejak awal telah memiliki smelter dengan teknologi rotary kiln electric furnace, PT Vale menaikkan nilai tambah, menghasilkan nikel dalam meter baik dengan kandungan nikel tinggi dan rendah besi. Kegiatan produksi ini sekaligus berintegrasi dengan komitmen untuk menjaga kelestarian lingkungan. PT Vale mereklamasi dan merehabilitasi lahan pasca tambang, mengembalikan ekosistem seperti semula, menjaga kualitas air, udara, dan mengolah limbah-limbah B3. PT Vale menggunakan energi terbarukan sebagai sumber energi utama, serta senantiasa berkontribusi kepada masyarakat, negara, dan peradaban dunia. Semua ini adalah komitmen untuk berkarya dengan nilai-nilai baru.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Mytcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Mytcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Drama komedi yang ditunggu-tunggu. Namong Sun, seorang gadis pemalu yang tiba-tiba menjadi percaya diri. Hingga berani dekati atasannya Kang Suwo yang super galak. Dibintangi artis Korea terkenal Park Bo Young dan Chu Jung Soo. Oh My Ghost, Senin sampai Jumat jam 8 malam hanya di NET.
Bangun usaha tuh kalau menurut gua tips yang paling simpel tuh pertama jalanin aja yang menurut lo emang lo paham dan suka gitu.
Kalau quality lo oke, cuan balik lagi ke lo. Iya.
Jangan lupa saksikan terus Cari Cuan hanya di O Channel.
Indonesia, negeri yang menyimpan segala keindahan.
Masuk!
My Trip, My Adventure kini hadir setiap minggu jam 8 pagi di Trans TV. Sambut kehadiran Deddy Corbuzier.
Enggak. Iya. Mau. Suka. Saya Deddy Corbuzier, yoga.
Deddy's Corner kini hadir setiap Sabtu jam 7 malam di Trans TV.
Sekarang lu pakai gituan, Ci?
Oh, ini. Ini sih Chris. Biar kalau mau bayar tinggal scan aja. Gampang kan?
Praktis amat. Gue juga mau dong pakai Chris. Gimana caranya?
Boleh. Nih, tanya Lisa. Gue kirim ya kontaknya.
Lisa du.
Itu udah gue kirim.
Jangan ragu untuk menghubungi saya ya. Lisa akan selalu senang membantu Anda.